I'm Marlo. And let me tell you, nothing hits harder than realizing your own family made a place for you at the kids' table. At my sister's birthday, I showed up, dressed like an adult, expected to be treated like family, and instead, they sat me with the children like I didn't belong. But that wasn't the worst part. That night, I walked away quietly. But what I didn't know was how deep the cracks ran. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. It didn't start at that party. It started long before, when they decided I'd always be the outsider. And what I uncovered after I left, well, let's just say, it nearly burned the whole family down. So why would a family go so far to erase one of their own? It started with a ping. A family group chat notification lit up my phone that Thursday afternoon while I was buried in paperwork at my apartment in Houston. Clarissa Carter, Mom. Hey Marlo! Hope you can make it Saturday. We're throwing Celine's birthday at the Monarch. Saved you a seat with the family and kids. Let me know. It wasn't an invitation. It was a reminder, a subtle signal of where I stood. A seat with the kids, again. Like always, I stared at the message, wondering why I still let it sting. But I didn't respond right away. I'd learned to swallow that feeling, like background noise you live with. As the weekend neared, the group chat lit up with excitement about the rooftop dinner, the cake, the guest list, and that old weight settled in my chest again. Familiar, quiet, heavy. Saturday came too fast. I worked most of the day, tempted to use my workload as an excuse. But guilt, or duty, won out. At 6:45 p.m., I pulled on a navy blue dress that felt more like armor than fashion. By 7:30, I was driving down I-45 toward Austin, headlights cutting through the dark. I told myself I wasn't going for them. I was going because if I didn't, they'd say I was difficult, dramatic, playing the victim. By 8:45, I was outside the Monarch, an upscale rooftop spot glowing with fairy lights. Luxury cars lined the valet. I checked my reflection, forced a smile, and stepped inside. I knew immediately. I didn't belong here, not really. Laughter rang out too loud. Conversations felt too curated. The hostess greeted me with a careful smile. Name? Marlo Carter, I said, smoothing my dress. She scanned her list too long. Ah, table C, with the family and kids. She gestured to a corner near the railing. High chairs, crayons, booster seats. I swallowed the heat rising in my chest and walked over. The kids barely looked up. The adults were at the bar, glasses clinking, deep in conversation. Clarissa passed me once, champagne in hand. She gave me a nod and kept walking. Celine stood glowing at the center, the star of the night, surrounded by admiration. I sat at table C, invisible. People noticed. Their looks said it all, pity, amusement. She's still here, still trying. It wasn't just about the seat. It was the years of being overlooked, the forgotten birthdays, the holiday photos I was asked to take, not be in. Always the quiet one, the dependable one, so Celine could shine. At 9:30, the lights dimmed. Clarissa took the mic. Thank you for coming to celebrate our shining star, Celine, she said. She thanked everyone, Celine's friends, Cassian's family, the kids, the staff, even the bartender, but not me. By 9:45, I stood up and left. Quietly. No one noticed. No one stopped me. At the door, I glanced back. Celine laughed, radiant, adored. I walked away. What I didn't know was that walking out wouldn't be the end. It would be the start of everything unraveling. I didn't stop walking until the glow of the Monarch's rooftop lights faded behind me, swallowed by the Austin skyline. The sound of glasses clinking and fake laughter still echoed in my ears as I reached my car parked 2 blocks away. I slipped behind the wheel, sat there for a moment, staring blankly at the steering wheel, trying to shake off the tightness in my chest. As I sat in the driver's seat, the memory of Clarissa's voice from just minutes ago played on a cruel loop inside my head. Thank you all for coming to celebrate our shining star, Celine. And to all our wonderful guests, Cassian's family, Celine's friends, and of course, our amazing family. Her words floated above the crowd like confetti, warm, inclusive, until they weren't. Because when her eyes swept the tables, they passed over mine like I wasn't even there. I remembered how she thanked the kids at my table, thanked the staff, even thanked the damn bartender, but never once said my name. By the time I started the car and pulled away from the curb, it was almost 10 p.m. The streets of downtown Austin buzzed with people spilling out of restaurants, couples holding hands, groups laughing too loud. I kept driving in silence. Halfway back to Houston, headlights slicing through the night, I felt it. This dull ache under my ribcage that wasn't just from tonight. It was an old wound, something I'd learned to carry, like a chipped tooth you learn not to bite down on. Because tonight wasn't new, it was just the most public. As the miles passed beneath me, my mind went back, like it always did, to all the moments that built this one. I thought about Christmas dinners when Clarissa would gush about Celine's promotions or her perfect boyfriend, then glance at me with that empty smile, as if she couldn't remember what I'd been doing that year. I thought about high school graduations, family BBQs, birthdays, especially birthdays. My knuckles tightened around the steering wheel when a memory I hadn't let myself touch in years resurfaced. I was 12. It was a gray February afternoon, and I came home from school to find Clarissa busy frosting cupcakes, balloons taped across the kitchen cabinets. My heart jumped. Maybe she remembered. Except the balloons were pink and silver, and the cupcakes were for Celine's 10th birthday. My birthday had been 3 weeks earlier. I'd spent it alone in my room with a store-bought cake I picked up myself. That night, when I finally asked Mom why she hadn't done anything, she smiled like I'd asked something silly. "You're older now, Marlo. You don't need all that." As if growing up meant you stopped deserving to be seen. I let the memory settle heavy in my chest as I merged onto Interstate 10. The clock on the dashboard blinked 11:45 p.m. By the time I reached Houston and pulled into my apartment complex, it was after midnight. The city was quieter here, streetlights casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. I parked, climbed the stairs to my second-floor unit, and unlocked the door to the stillness waiting inside. I kicked off my heels, set my phone face down on the counter without checking it, and walked straight to the living room window. Outside, the city lights stretched out like tiny fires, and for a long moment, I just stood there, breathing. It hit me then, how exhausted I was. Not from the drive, but from everything leading up to tonight. From years of pretending the crumbs they tossed my way were enough. The speech, the empty chair, the kids' table. It wasn't about the party, it never had been. It was about being invisible in a family that smiled for photos, but never saw me standing right there. Somewhere deep down, I knew this night would change something. I didn't know how or when, but there was a shift inside me. A thread pulled too tight, finally snapping loose. I turned away from the window, grabbed my phone, and checked it without thinking. 3 missed texts, all from Clarissa. "You didn't have to leave like that. It was Celine's night. I hope you're not making this about you again. Call me when you calm down." I laughed under my breath, low, humorless, the audacity. I set the phone back down and stood in the middle of my apartment, realizing for the first time that night, I was done trying to belong. I walked out of that party thinking I was leaving the past behind. But what I didn't know then was that walking away wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. The texts from Clarissa were still sitting on my phone when I woke up the next morning, as if they'd been waiting all night to remind me I was the problem. I'd left my phone face down on the kitchen counter before collapsing into bed around 1 a.m., too drained to deal with anyone's guilt trip messages. When I finally rolled out of bed at 8 a.m., sunlight cutting through the slats of my blinds, the weight of last night returned before my feet even touched the floor. I made coffee on autopilot, trying to shake the heaviness in my chest. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was that old gnawing ache, the one that started years before anyone sent me a text saying I was too sensitive. The coffee maker beeped, pulling me back. I poured a mug, sat down on the edge of my couch, and finally picked up my phone. More messages. Clarissa again. You didn't have to leave like that. It was Celine's day. A second one, time-stamped after midnight. Honestly, Marlo, you could have just smiled and gotten through the night. Why do you always have to make it about you? And then Celine. Hers arrived just after 1:30 a.m. Grow up, Marlo. You've always needed to be the center of attention. You couldn't let me have one night without making a scene. I stared at the screen, the bitter taste in my mouth sharper than the coffee. There it was. Even when I quietly walked away, even when I didn't say a word, they still blamed me. I put the phone down, but my thoughts kept circling like vultures. This wasn't new. It wasn't the first time they painted me as selfish for reacting to being overlooked. I'd spent a lifetime walking that tightrope. If I spoke up, I was dramatic. If I stayed quiet, I disappeared. The pattern was so familiar, so rehearsed, it almost made me laugh. But underneath that numbness, something sharper stirred. After I showered and dressed, I spent the rest of the morning cleaning, scrubbing counters that were already spotless, rearranging books that didn't need moving. Anything to keep myself from sitting still long enough to let the rage catch up to me. By noon, I gave up pretending I could avoid it. I sat back down on the couch, scrolling through my phone again, wondering if the weight in my chest would ever let up. That's when I saw it. One unread message at the bottom of the pile. From Dad. Edgar Carter wasn't the kind of man who sent texts at all, much less in the middle of family chaos. But there it was, sent at 2:07 a.m. Marlo, I'm sorry. I should have said something years ago. I knew how they treated you. I was just too weak to stop it. The words blurred on the screen. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stared, letting the words land like a quiet earthquake. I couldn't even remember the last time my father admitted to noticing anything, let alone acknowledged what I'd felt my entire life. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it cracked something open. Because it meant I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been too sensitive. He'd seen it too. And he did nothing. I leaned back, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. My coffee had gone cold. My chest felt heavy, but not in the same way as before. The truth settled in, slow and sobering. This wasn't about one birthday party. It wasn't even about Celine being the golden child or Clarissa weaponizing guilt like a second language. This was about the system they built, a story I'd been cast in without consent. I was the villain in their narrative because it made them the heroes. I didn't reply to anyone's texts that morning. Not Clarissa, not Celine, not even Dad. Instead, I sat there, staring at the screen until the words blurred again, and decided, no more silence, no more pretending. They wanted me to play the part of the problem. Maybe it was time I showed them what the problem really looked like. I didn't know how deep the lies went, but I was about to find out. The message came 2 days later, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, when I thought the storm had passed. I'd spent most of the day working from home, answering emails and pretending that what happened at the Monarch was behind me. The drizzle tapping against my window matched the rhythm of my thoughts. Quiet, relentless, hard to ignore. It wasn't until late afternoon, around 4 p.m., that my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar name lighting up the screen. Cassian Brooks. I hesitated before opening it. Cassian was Celine's boyfriend. We'd barely exchanged more than polite hellos over the years. He was part of her orbit, not mine. His message was short. Marlo, can we talk? Coffee? Tomorrow morning? I stared at the screen, suspicion curling in my stomach. Why would he want to talk to me? Still, curiosity won. The next morning, the clouds had cleared, but the air felt heavy. I made the drive back to Austin, a part of me wondering if I was being foolish, if this was another setup I hadn't seen coming. By 9 a.m., I was sitting at a corner table in a quiet coffee shop downtown, nursing a latte I didn't really want. Cassian walked in 5 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked. Dark circles smudged beneath his eyes. He scanned the room until he spotted me, then walked over. "Marlo," he greeted, voice stiff. "Cassian," I replied, motioning for him to sit. "Didn't expect to hear from you." He sat across from me, fiddling with his coffee cup like he didn't know where to begin. "I shouldn't be here," he said finally, "but after what I heard, I couldn't keep quiet." That got my attention. He glanced around, lowering his voice. The night of the party, before everyone arrived, I overheard Clarissa and Celine. My stomach tightened. Overheard what? Cassian exhaled, shoulders slumping. They were in the back lounge, laughing about how you'd react when you saw your table. I didn't move. I couldn't. They said, he swallowed, eyes meeting mine. They said you'd finally know your place when you were seated with the kids. And then Clarissa joked, "She'll never leave. She needs us more than we need her." His words cracked something open inside me, sharp and immediate. It hadn't been carelessness. It hadn't been an oversight. It had been cruelty, calculated, deliberate. For a moment, the sound of the coffee shop around me faded. All I could hear was that voice in my head whispering the same thing it always had. "You don't matter." I looked down at my hands, curling them into fists beneath the table. Cassian cleared his throat. "I thought maybe it was just a bad joke. But the way you left that night, I realized it wasn't the first time, was it?" I shook my head slowly, the weight of it pressing down on me. "No," I said quietly. "It's never just one night." Images flickered behind my eyes. Birthday parties where I wasn't mentioned. Holidays where I took the photos instead of being in them. Whispered comments about how I was too sensitive, too much, or worse. Invisible. Cassian's voice broke through the spiral. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have said something sooner." I met his gaze then, something cold settling in my chest. "It's not your apology I need," I replied, "but thank you." He shifted uncomfortably. "I don't think they understand what they've done." A bitter smile touched my lips. "Oh, they understand. They've been doing it my entire life." For the first time in days, I felt something shift. Not sadness, not helplessness, resolve. I leaned back, my voice steady. "They think I won't do anything. They're wrong." Cassian nodded, like he understood more than he wanted to. I stood up, sliding my chair back quietly. As I grabbed my coat, I glanced at him one last time. "Thanks for telling me," I said, "but this isn't your fight." When I stepped out into the bright morning light, the decision was already made. The game they'd been playing, I was finally ready to play back. I drove back to Houston after that meeting with Cassian, the weight in my chest heavier than when I'd arrived in Austin. But there was something else burning underneath it. Clarity. For the next 2 days, I kept my head down. I went to work, answered emails, paid bills. On the surface, I was living my usual life. But under all of that, something in me had shifted. On the third morning, as I was sorting through invoices in my home office, my phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized, but the area code was Austin. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I answered, cautious. A calm, measured voice replied. "Marlo?" "This is Mirabelle Brooks." My heart stopped for a beat. Cassian's mother. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and people stopped talking, not out of fear, but because they wanted to hear what she'd say. "We've never spoken directly," she continued, "but I think we should." I cleared my throat. "What is this about?" She paused, then said quietly, "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone." "Could you meet me? I believe we have something in common." An hour later, I was back on the road toward Austin, wondering how many more surprises this family could throw at me. We met at an upscale cafe tucked into a quiet corner of downtown. The kind of place where everyone wore pressed clothes and whispered politely. Mirabelle was already seated when I arrived, perfectly composed in a cream blazer, a porcelain cup of tea in front of her. She stood when I approached. "Marlo," she greeted, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from her, folding my hands on the table. "I won't waste your time," she began, sliding a manila folder across the table toward me. "I wanted you to see this before it becomes public knowledge." I glanced down at the folder, but didn't open it yet. "What is it?" Mirabelle's gaze didn't waver. "Documentation showing that Celine attempted to use the Brooks family name to secure a private business loan, without Cassian's knowledge or consent." Her voice remained steady, but I could hear the steel underneath. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, loan applications, even a draft agreement where Celine listed herself as a family representative. It was all there: names, dates, signatures she wasn't authorized to use. I swallowed hard, each page heavier than the last. She was counting on Cassian's family money to back her new venture, Mirabelle said quietly, without ever asking. My fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. This is fraud," Mirabelle nodded once. "And manipulation, which, I believe, isn't new behavior in your family." I looked up at her, something icy settling behind my ribs. "You knew she was capable of this?" "I suspected," she said simply, "but what I heard after the party confirmed it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the cafe felt far away, like background noise to something larger, uglier. When I finally spoke, my voice was quieter but sharper. "Why tell me?" Mirabelle folded her hands. "Because you're the only one who seems willing to see the truth." When I left the cafe 20 minutes later, the folder was in my bag and my phone was already in my hand. I didn't hesitate. By the time I reached my car, I had sent the message to Clarissa and Celine, both. "Why, if you keep trying to control me and hurt others, I won't stay quiet anymore." The response from Clarissa came within minutes. "Marlo, you're being dramatic. This is family business. You always blow things out of proportion." Celine, of course, said nothing. I sat there in my car, staring at the screen, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes. Not from hurt this time, but from anger. They weren't even surprised. They didn't deny it. They dismissed me like they always had. But this wasn't like before. Because now, I had proof. This wasn't about birthday parties or forgotten names and speeches anymore. This was about how far they were willing to go to keep me in my place, and how far I'd have to go to tear that place down. I took a breath, steadying myself, and typed one final message to Clarissa. "Keep pretending this is nothing. You're about to see exactly how much nothing looks like when it burns." I hit send. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They were about to see just how wrong they were. The message I sent to Clarissa burned in the back of my mind long after I hit send. For 2 days, the silence was deafening. No texts, no calls, no carefully worded apologies. Just quiet. Until the knock at my door. It was Thursday evening. I'd spent most of the day working from home, reviewing financial reports for a client, trying to pretend the storm wasn't circling closer. Around 7:30 p.m., I was just about to shut down my laptop when the pounding came, a sharp, impatient knock that rattled the door. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Celine. When I opened the door, she was standing there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like I'd personally set her world on fire. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice tight. I didn't bother to hide my sigh. "I guess." She brushed past me, walking into the living room like she owned the place. The second the door closed behind us, she spun to face me. "Are you seriously trying to ruin my life?" There it was. No hello, no explanation, straight to the accusation. I folded my arms. "You showed up uninvited to my home to ask me that?" She took a step forward. "You've been talking to Mirabelle, to Cassian, spreading lies." I shook my head, a dry laugh slipping out. "No lies, Celine, just facts, ones you worked really hard to bury." Her lips curled into something between a sneer and a smirk. "You're jealous. You always have been." "Jealous?" I repeated, incredulous. "Of what? The lies? The manipulation?" Celine rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You've always needed someone to blame for why your life is so sad." That word snapped something in me. "Don't." I warned quietly. She ignored me. You couldn't stand that it was my night, that Mom loves me more. So now you're what? Playing detective? Digging up things that aren't your business? I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay steady. Celine, it became my business when you dragged my name through the mud and laughed about it. When you sat back and let Mom treat me like a footnote for 30 years. Her jaw tightened. I stepped closer. You don't get to walk in here and pretend like I'm the one who started this. For a second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Uncertainty. But she buried it quickly. You need to drop this, Marlo, she snapped. You're about to tear this family apart. I met her glare, something cold settling in my chest. Maybe it needs to break, I said softly. Maybe that's the only way to rebuild it without all the rot. Celine scoffed. You're unbelievable. Without another word, she stormed toward the door, yanking it open. Before she left, she turned back one last time. You're gonna regret this. The door slammed behind her. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something sharper. Resolve. Later that night, around 10 p.m., I was on the couch with a book I wasn't reading when my phone pinged. An email. From Clarissa. Subject line, let's not do this. I clicked it open. Sweetheart, it began. I know you're upset, but this doesn't have to get ugly. You know how Celine is. She doesn't mean half the things she says. Don't let this tear our family apart. There it was again. That carefully polished, insincere tone. The fake concern. The manipulation. The email ended with, let's talk soon. I know you don't really mean to cause trouble. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I deleted the message without replying. I wasn't falling for it anymore. No more gaslighting. No more pretending this was normal. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, the hum of the city outside my window like background noise to the decision already made inside me. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. The days after Celine showed up at my door passed like a blur of static. I went to work. I logged into meetings. I smiled politely at the neighbors in the hallway. But something in me had hardened. By the 6th day after the party, the war began. It started quietly. A co-worker in my office's break room gave me a strange look as I poured my coffee. Someone I barely spoke to, a woman named Ashley, said under her breath, Hey, hope you're doing okay? Heard things have been rough at home. I frowned, forcing a polite smile. I'm fine, thanks. That was the first crack. By lunchtime, 3 more colleagues had awkwardly mentioned family drama I hadn't told them about. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Small-town gossip. Maybe someone saw Celine outside my apartment the other night. But when I checked my phone at 3 p.m., it was undeniable. Group chat messages, extended family threads, even a few DMs on Facebook, all hinting at the same thing. Is everything okay, Marlo? Your mom mentioned you've been struggling. I hope you're getting help. Clarissa said you've been lashing out a lot lately. Celine said you left her party in tears. Wish you'd just talk to her. My hands tightened around the phone as I scrolled, the words blurring together in one sickening thread. They were painting me unstable, mentally fragile, bitter, the unstable daughter causing family chaos. I set the phone down, breath shallow. They weren't just fighting back. They were trying to discredit me. Clarissa and Celine had done this before, in smaller ways. Little comments about how I overreacted, how I was too emotional. But now it was public. They were playing dirty. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Aunt Carol, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, texted, I know you're hurting, honey. Don't burn bridges. One of my closest friends called, voice hesitant. Your mom reached out to me, said you're spiraling. The word echoed in my head like a slap. I stood at my kitchen window, staring out at the Houston skyline, fury pulsing behind my ribs. This was how they'd always won. Not by fighting fair, but by convincing everyone else I was the problem. And for most of my life, I'd let them. Not this time. I grabbed my phone and scrolled back through my messages until I found Cassian's name. My thumb hovered for a moment before I typed, You deserve to know the truth. before you marry into this. I attached every document Mirabel had given me, the emails, the fake loan agreements, the messages Clarissa and Selene had sent over the years. Then I added one more message. They've spent their whole lives making me the villain, but you should know who's really pulling the strings. I hit send. It was almost midnight when I shut my laptop, the last remnants of my workday forgotten. The smear campaign had made one thing clear. There was no going back. I wasn't the family problem. I was the only one who'd finally stopped pretending. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence felt heavier than ever, but it wasn't suffocating. It was the calm before the storm. They tried to silence me. Instead, I just handed them the match. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, my phone buzzed with a single message from Cassian. "We need to talk." That was it. No hello, no pleasantries. The same Cassian who, a week ago, had barely spoken to me beyond polite nods, now wanted to talk. I replied with a simple, "Tell me when and where." That afternoon, I drove back to Austin. The clouds hanging low over the city felt like a weight pressing against my chest. When I arrived at Cassian's house, he was already waiting by the front door, hands shoved in his pockets, jaw tight. He didn't invite me inside. Instead, he spoke right there on the porch. "I ended it," he said without preamble. "With Selene." I blinked, trying to process. He went on. "After everything you sent me, the financial documents, the messages, the lies, I couldn't ignore it anymore." There was no triumph in his voice, just exhaustion. "My family knows," he added. "The investors pulled out of her startup this morning. The wedding's off." A beat of silence stretched between us. "She'll blame you," I said quietly. Cassian gave a bitter smile. "She already does." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you for listening," I said. He shook his head. "Thank you for telling me." When I drove back to Houston that evening, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the freeway. For a moment, I felt lighter. But I knew better than to believe the storm was over. By the time I got home, there was an email waiting for me. Subject line, "Can we talk?" It was from Clarissa. My stomach twisted as I opened it. "Marlo," it began, "I think we've all let things get out of hand. I'd love to sit down over dinner and talk this through. This family doesn't need more division. Selene's hurting. You don't need to destroy her future over old wounds." She signed it. "Love, Mom." For a long time, I stared at the screen, rereading the words. It was everything I'd heard my whole life, wrapped in sweet concern and hidden threats. Don't ruin the family. Don't hold grudges. Don't make this about you. I closed the email without replying. For years, I'd bent myself backward to be the daughter they wanted. I'd swallowed every slight, ignored every wound. All for what? So they could rewrite the story and make me the villain? Not anymore. That night, after a long shower and a glass of wine, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I typed a reply to Clarissa's email. No. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no more pretending. I hit send. Then I blocked her number. The next few days passed in eerie quiet. The family group chat went silent. Selene's social media accounts disappeared one by one. Friends who used to comment under every post fell off the radar. The whispers in the background were still there, of course. Co-workers, distant cousins, people who had opinions about family drama that wasn't theirs. But I stopped listening. I'd spent my whole life trying to fix something that wasn't broken by me. And now, for the first time, I didn't care how the story sounded to anyone else. Late one evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the Houston skyline glow against the night, my phone buzzed with one last message from an old family friend. "I don't know what's happening, but I hope you're okay." I smiled faintly, setting the phone down. I was okay. For the first time in my life, I chose myself, and there was no turning back. The days after everything collapsed stretched out like empty pages. It had been 2 weeks since Cassian called off the wedding, 2 weeks since Celine disappeared from every social platform she once dominated. 2 weeks since Clarissa's last attempt to pull me back in had failed. And the silence was deafening. The family group chat remained a graveyard. No memes, no family updates, no half-hearted birthday wishes. For years, I'd craved that chat's attention. I used to check it obsessively, hoping to see my name, to be included in the jokes, the photos, the plans. Now, it sat there, unread, irrelevant. In a way, it felt like mourning something that had died long ago. I didn't miss them. I missed who I thought they could be. One quiet Tuesday morning, as I was cleaning out my inbox, a new email appeared. From Clarissa, no subject line. I hesitated for a long moment before opening it. There was no long apology, no dramatic plea. Just one sentence. I hope you find what you're looking for. I stared at it, waiting to feel something, anger, grief, maybe even guilt, but I felt nothing at all. I clicked delete without replying. Later that afternoon, I left my apartment and walked down to the city park. It was one of those crisp spring days in Houston where the air felt lighter, almost forgiving. Kids laughed near the playground. Dog owners chatted over coffee cups. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like an outsider watching life happen without me. I sat on a bench under a wide oak tree, letting the breeze wash over me. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I ignored it. For once, no message mattered more than this moment. I thought about everything that had happened. The birthday party, the insults, the lies, the manipulation. For so long, I'd believed that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, made myself smaller, they'd let me belong. But that night, when I walked away from Celine's birthday party, I hadn't lost anything. I'd started finding myself. And it wasn't perfect. The wounds were still there, still tender beneath the surface, but they no longer controlled me. The park around me buzzed with life. A little girl zipped past on a scooter, her parents cheering her on. For a brief second, I thought about my own childhood, the birthdays without cake, the empty chairs, the long nights wondering what I'd done wrong. And then I let it go. Because I knew now, closure doesn't come from the people who hurt you. It comes when you stop waiting for them to fix what they broke and start building something better for yourself. Before I stood up to leave, I pulled out my phone one last time and typed a message in my notes. Not to send to anyone, just to remind myself. You don't have to sit at a table where you're not welcome. You can always build your own. As I walked away from the park, the Houston skyline glittering ahead, I smiled. I left that night thinking I'd lost a family. But what I really did was find myself. And before I end this story, let me leave you with something I wish someone had told me a long time ago. Sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Not because you're unworthy, but because they're too broken to see you clearly. And you will waste years, maybe decades, trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for you. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. You don't need anyone's permission to choose peace. You don't owe anyone your silence in exchange for their approval. Walking away isn't weakness, it's freedom. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or like no matter how hard you try, you're always the problem. This story was for you. Because you're not the problem. You're the one finally brave enough to stop pretending everything's okay. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from people you thought you couldn't live without, just to finally breathe again? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home for you. Or tell me, where are you watching from? Your stories, your struggles, your victories matter here. And hey, if this video made you feel seen, if it gave you even a sliver of strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are never too old, too broken, or too late to start writing your own story. Hello, my name is Abigail. When I was 14, my mother pulled into a gas station, tossed me a 20, handed me a worn-out bag, and said, "You're grown. Figure it out." Then she got back in the car and drove away with her new husband, and their picture-perfect family. I waited there for 6 hours. She never came back. But while I was sitting on a cold bench watching strangers come and go, she was posting photos online with the caption, "Making memories with the ones who matter most." I used to wonder if it was just a bad moment. Maybe she cracked. But what if it wasn't a moment at all? What if it was a plan? What if they had been erasing me long before they ever left me behind? She didn't even pull the car into a parking spot. Just right there, next to the pump, like she was dropping off a package that didn't belong to her anymore. I remember the clicking of the engine, the faint buzz of the gas station's neon sign, and the way her fingers tightened around the steering wheel one last time before she let go. "Get out," she said flatly. "You're grown. Figure it out." That was it. No hug, no eye contact, just the sound of the trunk popping open like a door slamming on my childhood. I stepped out slowly, confused more than scared. My backpack, one of those old canvas ones with a frayed zipper, hit the pavement with a soft thud. Before I could ask anything, before I could even say goodbye, she shifted the gear and pulled away. Dorian sat in the driver's seat now. He never looked at me. And in the back, Callista waved, stiff and rehearsed, like she wasn't sure if it was allowed. And then, they were gone. Just like that. I stood on the edge of a rundown gas station somewhere on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. The wind cut through my jacket like it knew I didn't belong there. A cold November morning, gray skies, no sun, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones and stays there. At first I didn't panic. Maybe it was shock. Maybe some deep, dumb part of me thought this was a test, that she'd loop around in a minute, laugh nervously, say something like, "Had you there for a second, didn't I?" So I waited. First 5 minutes, then 10. I walked to the edge of the pavement, hoping to see brake lights. I paced. I sat on the concrete ledge. I stood back up. I told myself stories. Maybe there was an emergency. Maybe they'd forgotten something and would be back soon. But the longer I stood there, the more silence I got. No one asked if I was okay. No one cared that a 14-year-old girl was sitting with a backpack and no ride. The cashier inside barely looked up when I walked in to ask if I could sit somewhere out of the cold. He pointed to the corner near the vending machine like he was pointing to a trash can. An older man in a trucker jacket passed by an hour later and asked if I needed anything. I told him no, politely. He left a granola bar on the ledge anyway, without another word. I didn't eat it right away. Pride can be heavy, even when your stomach's empty. Eventually, I realized I needed to know what time it was. My phone was dead. Figures. I asked a young woman at the gas pump if she had a charger. She handed me hers without hesitation. God bless women who don't ask questions when they see another woman on the edge. I plugged in, leaned against the wall, and turned it on. The screen flickered. Battery at 2%. One notification. Instagram. My mother had posted, "Weekend escape with the ones I love the most." The caption sat beneath a photo of the beach, Seraphine in a sun hat, drink in hand, smile full of teeth. Dorian had his arm around her, Callista in the center, glowing in matching blue with them. They were all wearing sweaters. The same ones they made me pack just in case. I stared at it so long I didn't realize I was holding my breath. It wasn't just the post, it was the timestamp. 10 minutes after they left me, they didn't forget me. They had planned it. I zoomed in on the photo. There, on Callista's lap, was the book I had been reading, the one I accidentally left in the back seat. My name was on the inside cover. They didn't even check. They never intended to take me with them. That realization hit harder than the cold. This wasn't abandonment by impulse. This was erasure by design. I thought back to the night before. Seraphine had been distant all week, but that night, she was ice. No eye contact, no dinner, just instructions. Pack a small bag. We're going away for a day or two. No details, no explanation. I remember asking, "Where are we going?" She replied, "Just somewhere to get clear." Her tone made it clear. Don't ask again. I packed my own bag. No help, no oversight. One change of clothes, my history book, a half-dead charger, toothbrush, granola bar, $20 from babysitting last week. She said nothing when I got in the car the next morning. Dorian was already in the front seat. Callista had headphones in. The only sound was the tires on the road. I didn't speak. I just stared out the window, trying to memorize the streets in case I needed to find my way back. Some part of me already knew. And now, sitting on a metal bench near the station's ice machine, I watched people come and go. Families, couples, a woman holding a toddler while pumping gas. No one looked twice at me. I was invisible. The charger died again. My phone blinked red and then black. I counted my cash. $20. Folded, refolded, smoothed out, counted again. That was all I had. No card, no ride, no idea where I was. Not really. My legs ached. My fingers were stiff. I could feel the edges of panic clawing up my throat. But then, I remembered a number. It had sat in my contacts list for years, never deleted. Even after Seraphine told me to forget she existed. I pulled my phone out again, just in case. Tapped the number. My thumb hovered over the green call button. I didn't expect her to answer. She was in her 70s now, I thought. Maybe the number had changed, but I pressed it anyway. Ring, once, twice. And then, a voice I hadn't heard in 3 years. Steady, warm, unmistakable. Abigail? Idalene, I whispered into the phone, unsure if I was still awake or slipping into some kind of survival hallucination. My hands were trembling, not from the cold anymore, but from something deeper, relief maybe, or the sudden cracking open of the wall I'd built to keep myself together. Her voice didn't waver. Where are you, Abigail? Speak clearly, sweetheart. Are you safe? I looked around, taking in the gas station again. The air smelled of diesel and burned coffee. I'm at a place called Riverbend Gas, off Highway 74, I said. They dropped me off here this morning and they're not… My voice gave out. My throat felt too small. Idalene didn't react the way I thought she would. No panic, no fuss. Just steady, unwavering resolve. I know where that is. Don't move. Stay inside the station. Don't go with anyone. I'm coming for you. I'll be there in under 2 hours. 2 hours. I'd already been here for 4. Don't you want to know what happened? I asked, the words catching in my mouth like broken glass. I'll hear it when I see you, she said. But for now, just know this. None of this is your fault. Not a drop of it. You didn't deserve this, Abigail. That was it. That one sentence. After hours of being ignored, dismissed, erased, that one sentence broke something in me, not in a painful way. It cracked open the part that still believed I had to earn love. I didn't do anything wrong, I said, half to her, half to myself. No, you didn't. Now stay warm, stay put, and let me come get you. I hung up and clutched the phone, holding it like it might disappear if I let go. I tried calling other people next. My older sister, who used to braid my hair when I was little, straight to voicemail. My aunt, who once promised to take me shopping for a school dance but never showed. No answer. Even a friend of my mother's, who used to call me her little bonus girl. Her number was disconnected. I went through every name that ever claimed to be family, and one by one, I watched their names turn gray. Disconnected. Ignored, blocked. That's when I realized something nobody had said out loud before. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't one bad day. They all knew. Or worse, they didn't care. I stayed inside the gas station's corner, the one near the outdated claw machine with prizes covered in dust. The cashier didn't look twice at me. I kept checking the door, the road, the sky. Time moved slow and heavy. Rain started tapping against the window in that soft, slanted way. I pulled my knees up to my chest and curled around my backpack, like it could somehow keep me grounded. I unfolded the $20 bill for the 10th time. Still 20. Still all I had. I gave in and opened the granola bar the trucker left me. It was peanut butter and oats, a little stale, but it was food. Minutes passed, then maybe an hour. I watched the clouds darken as the drizzle became a steady sheet. The parking lot was nearly empty now. Even the truckers had moved on. My phone died again. This time, I didn't scramble for a charger. Instead, I whispered to myself, softly, like a promise I needed to hear from someone else. I'm still here. I repeated it. I'm still here. Because if I could say it, maybe I could believe it. Maybe being here meant I still mattered, even if no one had shown up to claim me. Eventually, the noise of the rain was interrupted by the soft rumble of tires on wet pavement. A car pulled into the lot, not a new model, but clean. Dark gray sedan, windows tinted. It moved with quiet purpose. No headlights flashing, no honking, no chaos. I stood slowly, unsure if I should hope. The driver's door opened first. And there she was, Idaline. Older than I remembered, of course. Her hair was white now, not steel gray. Her frame smaller. But she moved with that same unflinching dignity I remembered from childhood Thanksgivings and Sunday visits, before the fallout, before the silence. She didn't rush to me. She didn't cry. She didn't stretch her arms out for a dramatic reunion. She just looked me straight in the eye, like she was confirming I was still real, still standing. Then she said, "Come on, Abigail, we're going home." A tall man stepped out from the passenger side. He was in a tailored gray suit, the kind that wasn't flashy but whispered expensive. He nodded at me, respectful but reserved. "Atticus Graves," he said simply. "Family law." I didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My voice had dried up somewhere between the granola bar and the realization that I no longer had a family. Or maybe I had one, just not the one who left me behind. I walked toward them, slowly. My backpack thumped against my side. My shoes squeaked on the wet concrete. As I reached the car, Idaline opened the back door herself. No driver, no assistant. She waited for me to get in first. I hesitated for a second, not because I didn't trust her, but because the word home had been used so carelessly in my life, I wasn't sure what it meant anymore. But I got in, because even if I didn't know what home was, I knew it wasn't here. And I knew it wasn't with the people who could leave a child in the cold and post beach photos 10 minutes later. The door shut behind me with a soft click. Final, but not harsh. Idaline and Atticus got in. The car turned back toward the road, headlights slicing through the rain. And just like that, I was moving again. Not because someone pushed me out, but because someone finally came back. The car ride stretched longer than I expected. Not because of traffic or bad roads, there weren't any, but because of what wasn't said. Idaline occasionally offered small, practical updates, like, "We'll be there in 20 minutes," or, "You can stretch your legs soon." But otherwise, it was silence. Not the heavy, manipulative silence Seraphine used like a weapon, but a quieter kind. Respectful. Letting me have my space. Atticus didn't speak at all. He sat in the front, typing something into his phone, eyes occasionally checking the side mirror but never intruding. He carried himself like a man who knew more than he ever said, and for the first time in days, that didn't feel threatening. The streets started changing. We left behind fast food signs and rundown gas stations. The pavement turned smoother, the houses spaced further apart. Trees lined the road like silent guards, and suddenly we were driving through gated communities with names etched in stone at the entrance. Names like Fox Hollow Estates and Silver Pines. This wasn't where people with secondhand backpacks lived. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching as the sedan curved down a long private driveway flanked by tall hedges and iron lanterns. We passed a fountain, an actual fountain, and then the house came into view, or mansion, whatever word you use when a place looks like it belongs in a period drama, not real life. 3 stories of red brick and white columns, wide front steps, symmetrical windows with black shutters and candles glowing softly behind each one. My throat tightened, and not from nerves. Seraphine once told me Idaline had moved to a tiny cottage after Granddad died, said she didn't believe in hoarding wealth, and lived like a retired schoolteacher with cats. That was a lie. A beautiful, calculated, well-placed lie. As we pulled up to the front, the door opened before we even got out. A woman in a navy sweater and black slacks stepped out onto the porch. Mid-50s maybe, kind face, but no-nonsense posture. She came straight to the passenger side and opened my door. "Welcome home, Miss Abigail," she said, not hesitating for even a second. I blinked at her. Home? I wanted to say, This isn't my home. I wanted to say, you must be mistaken. But I didn't say anything. I just stepped out, gripping my worn backpack like it was the only familiar thing left in this world. Inside smelled like lemon oil, old wood, and something baking. There were fresh flowers in a tall vase by the stairs. A portrait of my grandfather hung above the mantel. He looked younger than I remembered, stronger, more certain. Idalene led me down a wide hallway toward a staircase that curved gently upward. Your room is ready, she said, not waiting for a reply. Second floor, end of the hall. Blue door. The housekeeper, whose name I'd learn later was Margaret, had already carried my bag up ahead of us. When I pushed open the blue door, I froze. The walls were soft blue, the bedspread a crisp white. There was a small desk by the window, a built-in bookcase, a reading nook with cushions in muted tones. A window seat overlooked the back garden, and laid out neatly on the bed, a set of pajamas, my size. I always knew you'd need a place to land, Idalene said from behind me. The air in the room wasn't heavy like at Seraphine's. It didn't demand. It didn't accuse. It just existed, like it had been waiting. That scared me more than anything. Dinner came just after the sun slipped behind the trees. The dining room was grand but quiet. No shouting, no loud utensils clattering, no phones on the table. Just 3 plates, cloth napkins, a pitcher of water, and something that smelled like roast chicken and rosemary. We ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was respectful, like everyone knew words would come when they were ready. Eventually, Atticus looked up from his plate and said, I'm your legal advocate. I've worked with your great-grandmother for a long time. She asked me to be here because, well, there are things you deserve to know. I nodded slowly. Okay. Some of them may hurt, he added, but all of it is truth, and you have a right to truth. He said it like a doctor warning about a surgery that might leave a scar, but would save your life. After dinner, they didn't push. Idalene just said, if you'd like to speak, we'll be in the study, and left me to finish my tea. I found them there an hour later. I wasn't ready, but I was done pretending I could stay in the dark. The study had leather chairs, dark wooden shelves, and a fireplace with low flames crackling. Atticus sat with a folder in his lap. Idalene stood by the window. He opened the folder. My grandfather, I started. Atticus nodded. Your grandfather left behind a structured estate. When he passed, 5 million went directly to your mother. No conditions. I waited. I knew the twist was coming. But the rest of it, over 10 million, was placed in a trust. For you. Accessible at 18, or sooner under specific circumstances, educational needs, medical situations, or proof of neglect or danger. I said nothing. Your mother, he continued, attempted to gain access multiple times, claimed she needed it for your care. Each request was denied. I blinked. Then how? Atticus turned the folder around. There, in black and white, was a signed document, a waiver of beneficiary rights. According to this, he said, you voluntarily gave up your claim, signed at 12. I didn't, I said instantly. We know, Idalene replied. Her voice was like steel wrapped in velvet. The signature doesn't match, not even close, and the notary listed has been retired for 6 years. It's a forgery, a sloppy one. My fingers curled around the armrest. She forged my name to steal from me. Atticus nodded. She left me at a gas station, I added. But first, she tried to legally erase me. The rage didn't come as a scream. It came as a quiet burn under my skin. It didn't demand fists or curses. It just settled. Heavy. Certain. Can we prove it? I asked. Atticus didn't hesitate. We already have. Idalene stepped closer. They thought you were weak because you were quiet. Let's use that. I looked down at the document one more time. They'd tried to cut me out of the story, but now I had the pen. That night, I barely slept. Even in the warmth of the Whitmore estate, with clean sheets and silence instead of shouting, my mind didn't quiet. I didn't toss and turn. I lay still, staring at the ceiling. The kind of stillness that isn't restful. It's watching, waiting, listening to what the dark might say next. By the time a sliver of cold sunlight crept through the window, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. My socks brushed against the rug. There was a soft knock on the door, but no one came in. When I finally stood, my legs felt heavier than they should. I moved toward the nightstand, expecting to find my folded pajamas from the night before. Instead, there was a cream envelope resting there. In neat, handwritten script, it read, "When you're ready, the study is yours." No signature, but it didn't need one. Idaline's way of saying, "No pressure, but I know you're curious." After a quick shower, I changed into the jeans and sweater Margaret had left for me. Everything fit too well for coincidence. I paused at the mirror, not out of vanity, but recognition. I looked like a version of myself I'd forgotten existed. Not the quiet kid in the background of every family photo. Not the inconvenience. Just me. By mid-morning, the house was gently buzzing. I passed through the halls, sunlight streaking across hardwood floors, voices murmuring from the kitchen. I caught the scent of fresh cinnamon, Margaret's doing, no doubt, but didn't stop. The study waited. It was warmer than I expected. Tall shelves lined the walls, packed with books that had actual dust on them. A large leather chair sat near the window, where sunlight poured in like something sacred. On the far side, a built-in cabinet with brass handles. Atticus was already there, seated at the desk. His glasses rested low on his nose as he flipped through papers. When he saw me, he didn't stand or offer any ceremonial greeting. He just nodded, like this was a meeting we were both expecting. "You ready for this?" he asked. "Does it matter?" I replied. He gave a slight grin. "Fair enough." He stood and walked over to the cabinet, took a small key from his inner coat pocket, and unlocked it with care. From inside, he pulled several folders, some with my name typed across the tab. One, marked in red ink, "Private." He placed them gently on the desk and slid the top one toward me. "Start here," he said. I opened it. At first, it was just numbers, transaction logs, account activity, but then I saw the details: credit card purchases in my name, tens of thousands of dollars, jewelry stores, designer clothing, beauty clinics, a spa in Miami Beach, a salon in Los Angeles, all billed under Abigail Whitmore. But I'd never been to either place. "Why would she use my name?" I asked, my voice thinner than I intended. "Because legally," Atticus said, "you still had a clean identity and access to funds she could mask through you. It's financial fraud. But more than that, it's personal exploitation." The next folder was worse. Cosmetic procedures. Seraphine's name appeared on confirmation emails, but all charges were under me. Lip fillers, skin resurfacing, even an appointment for dental veneers. My stomach flipped. "She used me like a bank card," I muttered. "She used you like a ghost," he corrected. "Someone who couldn't talk back." I didn't answer. The final folder was thicker. Notes, reports, a preliminary psychological evaluation. No signatures, but there it was. A recommendation. Patient be considered for placement in behavioral realignment programming. Subject displays consistent signs of oppositional defiance, dissociative episodes, and deliberate refusal to engage with familial systems. I didn't even know what half of those words meant when I was the age this was dated. "They were trying to get me locked away," I said quietly. Atticus didn't answer. He didn't need to. I wasn't asking. "Where's the rest?" I asked. He looked at me carefully. "That's all we have." "No," I said. "There are pages missing. There's a gap in dates. There's no signature page." He paused. "Those are likely still in Seraphine's possession. If they exist, she would have kept them in her private home files or buried them in her attorney's safe." Idaline's voice came from the doorway. I hadn't even noticed her enter. "She never planned for anyone to look, and she certainly never expected you'd have the nerve." I turned to face her. "This wasn't some impulsive thing, was it? Leaving me at the gas station. This was planned." She nodded once. "It wasn't about getting rid of you in a moment of anger. It was about erasing you from the legal narrative. If she'd succeeded, you'd be in a facility right now. No access to your trust, no rights to contest anything. Just gone." I stared back down at the papers. My name was everywhere. But not me. Just the name. Just the placeholder. They wanted me out of the picture, I said, more to myself than to them. Not just physically, Idaline added. Legally, financially, emotionally, entirely. The rage didn't come all at once. It was slow, like water beginning to boil. Quiet bubbles. Pressure building. I stood. Can I keep these? Atticus looked to Idaline. She nodded. Oh, they're yours, he said. They always were. I carried the folders upstairs like they were made of glass. In my room, I spread them out on the bed, page by page, detail by detail. My eyes soaked in every timestamp, every forged signature, every lie wrapped in legal jargon. Then I opened a new notebook, the kind with a soft leather cover and thick pages that didn't bleed ink. And I started writing, not just what happened, but what I remembered. Every slight, every silence, every look of disappointment that wasn't earned. I began cataloging everything, not because I needed to hold on to it, but because I needed to own it. My story, my truth. I didn't cry, not then. Later that evening, after Margaret brought dinner to my room and left without comment, I returned to the notebook. This time, I wrote a letter. To Seraphine. I didn't write Mom. I wrote her name, and the letter wasn't an appeal. It wasn't a plea for explanation or understanding. It was a warning. I may be young, I wrote, but I'm not dumb. I know what you did, and I know what you tried to do. If you continue to smear me, to steal from me, to treat me like I'm disposable, you'll see that I'm not the girl you left at that gas station, and I will respond. I folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it. Then I put it in the drawer beside my bed. Not because I planned to send it, not yet, but just knowing it existed meant something had changed. I wasn't waiting for someone to rescue me anymore. I was documenting. I was preparing. If she came for me again, she would find I wasn't the same girl she left behind. The morning started like any other, except nothing was the same. Margaret had left warm biscuits and scrambled eggs outside my door, like she had a silent clock for my appetite. I ate slowly, forcing each bite down as the light outside shifted from soft gold to stark white. It was one of those winter mornings where the sun looked warm, but the air could still bite your fingers off if you weren't careful. By 8:20, I was dressed and ready for school. I hadn't been back since Seraphine left me at the gas station. No one from the school had reached out. No one had checked in. I wasn't sure what they knew, but something told me they knew exactly what they were supposed to. Atticus had offered to make a call ahead, to explain. I told him no. I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to walk in as me, not someone pre-justified. Idaline's car pulled up, and the driver opened the back door. I didn't need it. I slid into the seat on my own. The leather was cold, the silence colder. When I arrived, kids were already crowding around the front entrance. I stepped out, felt the stares before I heard the whispers. It started with side glances, then the shoulder nudges. A girl from biology class stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. Her friend leaned in and said something that made her jaw drop. I kept walking. The principal's secretary met me before I reached my locker. "Ms. Whitmore," she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. "The principal would like a word." I followed her down the hallway, past bulletin boards with flyers for prom dresses and SAT prep courses. Everything felt too loud, too colorful, like the world hadn't gotten the memo that my life had split in half. Inside the office, Principal Keller sat behind his desk, fingers steepled together like he was bracing for turbulence. "Abigail," he said, "this is delicate." "Then say it directly," I said, lowering my backpack to the floor. He cleared his throat. "We've received an anonymous concern regarding your mental and emotional stability. The language was formal, structured. It referenced potential safety issues." My stomach flipped, but my face didn't move. "Safety issues," I repeated. He nodded once. "Until we've reviewed the matter fully, we're going to ask that you take a temporary leave. It's not disciplinary, just procedural." The word landed like a slap. There was no investigation, no question about where I'd been or who I'd been with. No curiosity, just a quiet escort out of the building, as if I were a fire hazard no one wanted to mention. I walked back to the car. Margaret stood beside the open door, clearly briefed ahead of time. She didn't say a word, just waited. Once inside, I stared out the window, watching the school shrink in the rearview mirror. She's not just trying to erase me, I thought. She's trying to ruin me. Back at the estate, I found Atticus in the library, already expecting me. He didn't ask questions, just handed me his tablet. "Thought you'd want to see this before it spreads further," he said. The headline read, "Whitmore Heiress Missing, Mental Health Concerns Raised." Another article, shorter but nastier, suggested that I'd been in and out of care since age 10, that I had attachment issues, and that those closest to her feared a breakdown. None of them named me outright, but the descriptions were surgical, precise enough that anyone who knew me wouldn't need the name. They all quoted an unnamed family source. Only one person would feed the media like that, and she did it while sipping champagne somewhere, probably reading the same headlines she'd crafted herself. I scrolled through the comments. Some defended me, most didn't. One read, "Sounds like another spoiled rich girl acting out for attention." I closed the tablet. Atticus watched me closely. This kind of smear campaign doesn't come out of nowhere. "No," I said. "It comes from someone who thinks she's untouchable." I walked upstairs. My room, once a safe place to land, now felt too quiet. Too clean. I opened my laptop, pulled up the files we'd collected, credit card records, medical invoices, trust fund documents, each one labeled, time-stamped, categorized. I started drafting an email. No subject, just an empty body and a pile of attachments. One by one, I dragged them into the message window. The documents Seraphine had forged with my 12-year-old name. The receipts from the spa weekend she'd charged to my identity. The mock psychiatric evaluation she drafted in her own words. I typed one sentence. "If you continue, these go public." I stared at the cursor, blinking, waiting, just like me. But I didn't hit send, not yet. Instead, I grabbed my phone and opened the voice memo app. I took a breath, steady and sharp. "Seraphine," I said calmly, "I know what you're doing. I know how you manipulate people. I know how you dress it up in fake tears and crafted words and filtered family photos." I paused. Let silence do its job. "You left me at a gas station, but I kept the receipt. End of message." I sent the audio file to her private email, the one she used for club memberships and donor events. It was read at 9:12 a.m. She didn't reply. No shocked call, no denial, no gaslighting, just silence. That was the loudest admission of guilt she'd ever made. Later that evening, I went back to my files. This wasn't about court anymore. It was about memory, preservation, proof. She wanted me to look unstable, but truth isn't unstable. It doesn't panic. It doesn't need to shout. It just waits. So I kept gathering. Voice notes, dated journals, emails I never sent but always saved. Because if she wanted war, she should have picked someone less quiet and less observant. The next morning, I didn't bother with breakfast. I was already dressed when Margaret knocked lightly, murmuring something about eggs and fresh coffee. I told her I wasn't hungry. She didn't push. Just nodded, as if she understood this wasn't about food, not today. By 8 a.m., I was seated in the back of Idaline's car, parked quietly along the courthouse curb in downtown Asheville. The weather matched the mood, gray skies pressed low, the kind of cold that sinks into your coat and settles on your skin like disappointment. I held the envelope on my lap, not just a manila folder, but the envelope. Inside were 3 carefully printed copies of the surveillance footage from the gas station, time-stamped, undeniable, accompanied by documentation, financial forensics, forged signature comparisons, psychiatric suggestions falsely filed under my name, and a personal affidavit I'd written myself. My handwriting, my voice. No drama, just the truth. Atticus stepped out first, carrying a second copy of the file in a locked black portfolio. I followed, steady-footed, holding my envelope with both hands as if it were sacred. Inside, the county clerk greeted us politely. No fuss, no raised eyebrows, just process. Filing number, timestamp, signature. A receipt that said this moment wasn't imaginary. It existed. It was real. As Atticus turned to speak to one of the legal aides, I stood a few feet away, staring at the courthouse walls. Marble, old, the kind of place that looked like it had absorbed secrets for decades. It's not revenge, I whispered to myself. It's documentation. By mid-morning, we were back at the estate. The silence in the car wasn't tense. It was deliberate. I needed space, and Atticus knew better than to fill it. Once inside, I went straight to the study and opened my laptop. I clicked through folders labeled with dates and keywords: April Miami charges, gas station footage, waiver forgery scan, all neatly archived, all real. I paused on one file, a still frame pulled from the security footage. The moment Seraphine turned to me and said the words, "You're grown, figure it out," her mouth frozen mid-sentence. Her hand raised, not in a wave, but in dismissal. That girl in the frame, the one holding a faded backpack and standing still on concrete as a car drove away. She still believed someone would turn around. She still hoped. I saved the image to my desktop and printed one copy. Then I opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo album Idaline had given me. It was full of pictures I hadn't seen in years, holidays, birthdays, moments I'd forgotten existed. Page 17 held a photo from my 8th birthday, a summer day. Seraphine had braided my hair that morning. She wore a yellow dress and lipstick that didn't match her skin tone, but she looked radiant in the way young mothers do when the camera catches them off guard. In the photo, she was crouched beside me, one arm tight around my shoulder, the other holding up a birthday card I'd made for her. I looked stupidly happy. I slid the photo out and placed it beside the printed screenshot from the gas station. The contrast made my chest ache. Then I wrote a note. Short, precise. I still remember her. Do you? I sealed the photo and note in an envelope, wrote Seraphine's office address on the front in block letters, and left the return line blank. I didn't include my name. I didn't need to. Margaret dropped it in the outgoing mail pile that afternoon without asking. By early evening, the ripple had already started. A vague post appeared on Seraphine's curated Instagram feed. Some people can't let go of the past. Others live in it. Let's all give space, give grace, and focus on healing. Please respect our privacy. I almost laughed. Within an hour, a small local blogger picked up a rumor. Custody battle unfolding behind closed doors between wellness mogul and estranged daughter. And then there was the call. It came just after dinner. Idaline was pouring tea in the sitting room when the landline rang. She answered calmly and said only 3 words before hanging up. "She's spiraling already." I didn't ask for details. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on my bed, laptop glowing in the dark. My files were in perfect order. I clicked through them one by one, making sure the labeling was clear. One folder I renamed. Proof she left me. Proof I didn't disappear. I closed the laptop and took a deep breath. This wasn't anger anymore. This was clarity. Idaline knocked gently and entered with a fresh cup of tea. She didn't say much, just placed it on the nightstand and gave me that look, the one only women who've endured betrayal know how to give. Not pity, not concern, recognition. "They can't silence a girl who knows where the bodies are buried," she said. She was half kidding. I smiled anyway. Then I reached under the bed, pulled out a fresh notebook, and started drafting talking points. Calm, cold, strategic, no pleading, just the facts. She thought the courtroom would scare me, but the only thing I feared now was forgetting. They tried to delete me quietly, but now the whole court would see the file. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. I laid there, motionless, watching the shadow of the tree outside my window sway on the wall like it had something to say. I didn't feel fear. Not anymore. What I felt was closer to tension, like a bowstring pulled taut for too long. The car pulled up to the courthouse just before 8 a.m. Atticus was already waiting outside, straightening his tie. Idaline wore gray, not black, not blue, but the kind of gray that suggested quiet authority. Margaret had packed a thermos of hot tea for me, tucked neatly into a soft leather tote bag, along with my folder labeled Exhibits AD, Video Evidence, Medical Bills, Trust Documents, Witness Testimony. Outside the building, reporters had started to gather. Not the flashy Hollywood type, more the local beat. The ones who knew Seraphine not just as a name, but as a face they'd seen smiling on billboards, holding green juice, and selling forgiveness like it came in a bottle. She arrived minutes later, escorted. Cameras snapped. Her hair was blown out, makeup just enough to look natural. She wore cream, which is always calculated, neutral enough to appear innocent, expensive enough to whisper power. Callista was beside her. She looked older, dressed in a coat that looked eerily familiar. Too familiar. I stopped short. The buttons were loose from years of wear, the pocket stitching slightly undone. I knew that coat. It was mine. The one I used to wear on cold school mornings, the one Seraphine said made me look too moody for public photos. Now it was on Callista. They turned me into a costume, I muttered. Atticus looked at me, paused, and then placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Then let's show them the original still fits. Inside the courtroom, the energy shifted, formal, quiet, but heavy. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no tolerance for flair. As she settled into her chair, both legal teams stood. Seraphine's attorney, a man with a Harvard law degree and a face that knew how to pretend sympathy, opened with his version of our story. Your Honor, this is not a case of neglect, but of generational misunderstanding. A mother made difficult choices under pressure. This young girl has, sadly, been influenced by an aging grandparent with a known bias against her daughter's success. He gestured toward Idaline like she was a relic on display. Atticus didn't flinch. When it was our turn, he rose and spoke simply. This isn't about misunderstanding. This is about abandonment, about lies, about a child who was left at a gas station and erased from a narrative crafted for public consumption. We're not here with speculation. We have proof. The judge lifted her hand. Let's proceed with uninterrupted evidence presentation. Seraphine's team, clearly rehearsed, played a short promotional video. Soft music, shots of family vacations, candlelight dinners, health retreats, clips of smiling children. And there it was. Me. At 6 years old, sitting on a picnic blanket, laughing as Seraphine braided my hair. A clip from our one trip to Savannah. A shot of me asleep on the couch after school, back when naps were safer than conversations. No name, no context, just a face. The final screen faded in. Family has always been my everything. I didn't move. She took my face and stripped my name, I said quietly. During recess, in the hallway near the restrooms, I passed Callista. She stopped, looked around, made sure no one was near, then whispered, I'm sorry, I didn't want to wear it. I didn't say a word. I just looked her in the eyes and kept walking. Back in court, it was Atticus's turn. We'd like to submit Exhibit B, he said. He handed the judge a letter, handwritten, ink faded slightly, but legible. Dolores Madden, my old neighbor. The woman who lived 2 doors down when I was in middle school. The letter told the story of what she saw. Of the time Seraphine dragged me by the arm across the driveway, screaming that I was a mistake she wished she could undo. Of the nights when I cried on the porch steps until Idaline showed up. The judge read part of it aloud. I stayed quiet because I didn't want legal trouble. But I always knew one day this child would need someone to say, I saw it too. The room was silent. Even Seraphine had stopped posturing. The judge set the letter down slowly. This letter, corroborated with the financial documents and footage already submitted, provides significant context. She turned to Seraphine. Do you wish to respond? Seraphine's lawyer leaned in, whispered something. Seraphine nodded, but didn't speak. Her jaw was tight. Her hands curled around the arms of her chair like she might fall out if she let go. For the first time, she looked human and afraid. The reporters scribbled faster. One leaned over to another, whispering behind his hand. The tide had shifted. For months, I was the troubled teen. The girl who ran away. The unstable daughter. But now I was the one with records, footage, witnesses. And her curated image, her brand of motherly perfection, had begun to crack. The judge cleared her throat. We'll break for lunch. Both parties will return for custody review this afternoon. I stood, collected my folder, My fingers were steady. They dressed her in my coat. Now I was dressing the truth in facts. The lunch break passed slowly. I didn't eat. Neither did Atticus. Idaline nibbled a cracker in silence while flipping through her notes like she was reviewing an old grocery list, not preparing to defend me against a woman who used to call herself my mother. By 1:15, we were back in courtroom 3. The reporters had multiplied. Some looked familiar, local. Others carried larger cameras, sharper suits, and fake neutral expressions like they were ready for a national scoop. Seraphine entered 5 minutes later. Alone. No husband, no PR rep. Her lawyer stayed close behind, whispering into her ear while she nodded like a senator at a press conference. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. When the judge re-entered, we all stood. The room held its breath. Court is now in session for the matter of Abigail Whitmore versus Seraphine Cade. Atticus stood. Calm, confident. He carried a single folder, nothing more, not dramatic, just prepared. Your Honor, he began, today we submit the full file for evidentiary review, compiled under penalty of perjury, sourced from original documents and direct witness testimony. The clerk walked forward, took the folder, and passed it up to the bench. The judge opened it with the same care one might give to a letter from an estranged friend, both curious and cautious. Inside were surveillance footage from the gas station, time-stamped, unedited, credit card statements showing charges under my name, luxury resorts, surgical procedures, even airline miles she redeemed. A voice recording where Seraphine said, "She'll be better off locked away for a while. I just need to get her out of the way." Medical records with photos of bruises. Ones I never knew Idaline had quietly documented during my visits. Letters from Dolores and a middle school guidance counselor who had once expressed concern about unusual parental coldness. No one said a word for several minutes as the judge skimmed through the pages, flipping with deliberate calm. Then came the part I never expected. "Miss Whitmore," the judge said, turning toward me, "would you like to speak?" I stood, slowly, no paper in my hands, no rehearsed speech. "I didn't run away," I said. "I didn't break down. I didn't disappear." I let the silence breathe before I continued. I was left. A rustle moved through the audience seats. "You tried to write me out of the story," I said, now turning my eyes, finally, to Seraphine. "But truth doesn't need your permission. It exists whether or not you acknowledge it." My voice didn't shake. "You called me difficult, dangerous, unstable. All because I wouldn't smile when you said 'say cheese' for photos you knew were lies." I paused. "I was the background noise in every picture you took with Callista. You dressed her in my clothes. You used my face in your videos. But you never once said my name." The judge raised a hand gently. "That will be enough, Ms. Whitmore. Thank you." I sat back down, breathing slow. Atticus gave a barely visible nod. Idaline reached over and squeezed my hand once. Then came the verdict. The judge closed the folder and folded her hands. "The evidence presented is damning. It confirms, beyond reasonable doubt, that the respondent, Seraphine Cade, engaged in calculated acts of abandonment, legal manipulation, and public deception." Seraphine's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Seraphine stared straight ahead. "Full legal guardianship of Abigail Whitmore is hereby awarded to Mrs. Idaline Whitmore." A breath I didn't know I'd been holding escaped me. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "all funds previously restricted from the trust are to be immediately restored under sole access by Abigail Whitmore. The matter is also referred to the district attorney for formal criminal investigation." It was over. Just like that. Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy exploded. I didn't stop to answer questions. Neither did Atticus. But the cameras caught everything they needed. By nightfall, her face was on every blog, every social headline. Wellness queen accused of child abandonment. Hatch Justice for Abigail trends nationwide. Her Instagram went dark by morning. The companies that had lined up to promote her detox programs and intentional parenting workshops, gone. Sponsorships vanished. Her website redirected to a 404 page. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. that I laughed or danced or popped a bottle of sparkling water with Idaline in celebration. But what I felt was stillness, because some wounds don't make noise when they close. Later that weekend, Seraphine called from a blocked number. I watched the phone ring, each vibration sharp and hollow. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. I deleted it without pressing play. She had used her voice to sell lies for so long, she didn't get to use it with me anymore. She lost her voice the day she tried to silence mine. The courthouse door clicked shut behind me for the last time, and something inside me did the same. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious either. I felt done, and that was enough. 3 months later, on a breezy Tuesday morning, I stood in front of the clerk's window at the county office, holding a manila folder with the kind of grip people reserve for old letters or folded flags. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes and a kind voice, glanced up. "Name change petition?" I nodded. "Yes, to my legal name, Abigail Whitmore." She looked through the folder. Birth certificate, court documents, guardianship transfer, trust recovery, everything in order. "No middle name?" "Just Abigail. That's all I want." She smiled slightly, then stamped the form. "There you go. It's official." No celebration, no balloons. No one else in line to applaud, just the click of a rubber stamp and the weight of silence I had grown used to. Still, when I stepped outside into the cool spring air, I closed my eyes for a moment and let the sun hit my face. I wasn't reinventing myself. I was reclaiming her, the one they called unstable, ungrateful, baggage, the girl who was only mentioned in whispers. The child cropped out of holiday photos and erased from every version of the story they told. I never needed a new name, I whispered to no one. I just needed my true one. That afternoon, I packed what little I owned, half of which had been quietly replaced by Idaline over the months. A few pieces of clothing, some books, a laptop, and the box of documents I refused to leave behind. Margaret helped fold the blankets. Atticus carried the final load to the car. Idaline met me at the door. No dramatic hug, no inspirational quotes, just one line. "You don't need to come back," she said, looking me in the eye. "Just don't forget where you started." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I took her hand, squeezed it once, and then climbed into the car. The drive to the new town took a few hours. I watched the scenery change from familiar trees to unfamiliar storefronts, from winding roads to straight, flat streets lined with modest homes. The apartment was small, but it had a balcony with just enough sun in the mornings and a spot for a plant I hadn't bought yet. The bedroom window faced east. The floors creaked a little when you walked too fast. It was perfect. I hung only one photo on the wall. Not of me, not of the trial. Just one of Idaline and me on the back porch last fall. We weren't smiling, but we were solid. And that felt more real than any smile ever did. I unpacked slowly, deliberately. My books found shelves. My laptop found its place on the desk. A new notebook sat beside it. The first line already written. Sometimes silence is survival, but speaking is how we take it back. The weeks that followed were quiet. I enrolled in community college online, started courses in legal ethics and child advocacy. I didn't talk about the trial. I didn't correct the neighbors who assumed I was just another transfer student starting over. Let them assume. Let them guess. I wasn't hiding anymore, but I didn't know anyone my story either. Then, one afternoon in late April, a package arrived. No return address, no postmark, just a plain envelope, handwritten. Inside was a photograph. Seraphine, hair pinned up, no makeup, being escorted down the courthouse steps by 2 plainclothes officers. Her head turned away from the camera, her hands not in cuffs, but almost. Clipped to the photo was a yellow sticky note. The handwriting was unfamiliar. She finally figured it out. I didn't react, not out loud. I didn't call anyone or post about it. I didn't cry. I just slipped the photo into a drawer I rarely opened. Some wounds leave scars, but they don't leave maps. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of tea and let the city sounds replace the silence I'd known for so long. And then I spoke. Not to anyone in particular, but maybe to the version of myself that still needed to hear it. "If someone tells you that you're hard to love," I said, Maybe it's because they only know how to love conditionally. This was never about revenge. This was about truth. And truth doesn't need forgiveness to move forward. I picked up my pen, opened the notebook again, and began outlining a project I'd been sketching in my head for weeks. A nonprofit for youth who'd been abandoned, erased, rewritten. I didn't have the money yet, but I had the will. And sometimes that's more powerful than a trust fund. The past no longer dictated my name, my worth, or my path. She left me at a gas station. I left her at the courthouse. We both found what we were looking for, but only one of us was free. Sometimes the people who should love us the most are the ones who leave the deepest scars. But healing doesn't always come from their apology. It comes from choosing yourself over and over, even when they won't. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to protect you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if you found something real in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more powerful true stories. Hello, my name is Sky. You ever realize your family never loved you? Just the version of you that kept paying the bills? Christmas Eve, I told them I got promoted. My dad stood up and screamed, "Get out, leech!" My mom didn't say a word. The next day, I found a receipt. My laptop had been pawned for $300 by her. Then the lights went out at their house. Then the police showed up. Then my dad had to hand over the keys. But what hurt more than all of that? Knowing they'd planned it. How do you heal when the people who raised you are the ones who erased you? The morning had started like any other Christmas Eve, with me in the kitchen before sunrise. I was still in my flannel pajamas, rolling out pie crusts with flour smudged on my cheek, humming quietly to drown out the drone of the TV from the living room. My family was already settled on the couch, coffee mugs in hand, eyes glued to the football game as if it were a holy ritual. No one had come in to ask if I needed help. And no one had offered to peel a potato, stir the gravy, or even set the table. But I told myself they were just tired, and maybe, just maybe, they'd notice everything once dinner was ready. For the past 3 weeks, I'd worked overtime, not just at the firm, but here too, paying the gas bill, covering the Wi-Fi so Cairo could stream his content, and making sure Mom's insurance stayed current for her checkups. I was used to it. I had gotten so good at disappearing behind the scenes that I started to believe invisibility was love. But today was supposed to be different. By 4:00 p.m., the dining table was dressed with the best we had: taper candles, faded placemats, the one chipped china set we only pulled out twice a year. The turkey had rested just enough to stay warm, and the smell of cinnamon and nutmeg still hung in the air. I changed into my navy blue sweater dress, took a deep breath, and sat down between Mom and Cairo. My hands trembled slightly, not from nerves but from exhaustion, and I told myself again that tonight I'd finally feel like I belonged. Dinner started quietly, the kind of silence that's thick, not peaceful. Forks clinked. Cairo asked if the mashed potatoes were from a box. I didn't answer. I waited until everyone had at least touched their plate before I cleared my throat. "So," I began, smiling gently, "I have some news." Mom looked up, her mouth still chewing. Dad didn't even pause. Only Cairo leaned back slightly, probably assuming I'd gotten engaged. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it wasn't what came next. "I got promoted last week," I said. "Senior financial analyst." Dad's fork paused mid-air. "Oh," Cairo muttered. "Cool." Mom sipped her water. "That's nice, honey." Then silence. It hung there, long enough for the warmth of my own words to turn bitter in my mouth. I felt it all unravel in real time, this fragile hope I'd wrapped so tightly around their reaction, but I wasn't ready for what came next. My father slammed his fork onto his plate, the sound sharp and final. "Get out," he snapped. "You leech." The word hit me like a slap. It didn't even make sense. Me? The leech? "I'm sorry?" I managed. "Barely. You heard me," he growled. "You've been using this house as a damn hotel, acting like you're the boss, talking about your job like we owe you something." The room froze. My heart pounded. but everything around me slowed. Cairo's eyes darted to Mom. Mom didn't meet mine. She was busy rearranging the green beans on her plate, like they might spell out a different reality. No one defended me. "You live here rent-free," Dad continued, voice rising. "Like we're supposed to be grateful when you show up and pay a bill or two. You ain't special, Sky. You're not better than us." I blinked. My lips parted, but nothing came out. I wanted to scream, to list every bill I'd paid, utilities, groceries, insurance, to remind him that when Mom lost her job, I stepped in without hesitation, that when Cairo's car broke down, I paid for the repairs, that the Christmas ham on the table was bought with a bonus I barely had time to celebrate. Instead, I sat in stunned silence, because no amount of receipts would fix this. Then Mom added her piece. "Well," she said, not looking at me, "let's be honest. You just got lucky, Sky. That promotion could have gone to anyone." I turned to her, stunned all over again. "Lucky?" I echoed. She nodded, still pushing food around. "You've always had good timing, that's all." And just like that, every moment of self-doubt I had ever buried came rushing back. Every time she'd smiled and clapped when Cairo showed his art projects, but brushed off my report cards. Every time Dad praised Cairo's ambition, even when he hadn't worked in months. I had mistaken tolerance for acceptance, contribution for connection. They didn't just resent my success, they never saw it to begin with. I looked around the table and felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was hollow, the kind that makes you realize you were never part of the conversation to begin with. My chair scraped quietly against the floor as I stood. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my untouched plate, and straightened my shoulders. No one asked where I was going. I walked toward the front door, grabbed my coat from the hook, and slid it on. My hands moved automatically. Keys, wallet, phone, all muscle memory. Outside, the air had turned crisp. Snow flurried lightly, just enough to dust the porch. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I walked to my car, a dented silver Honda, older than Cairo's but still running thanks to my maintenance budget, and slid into the driver's seat. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. I sat there for a minute, the cold leather seeping into my coat, before turning the key. The engine hummed to life, low and steady. I hadn't said a word, but somehow, silence hurt them more than anything I could have screamed. By the time I pulled into the driveway again, the snow had thickened just enough to blur the familiar cracks in the pavement. My headlights cut through the darkness, catching the warped slats of the garage door that hadn't worked properly in years. The house looked different from the outside, colder, like it somehow knew I didn't belong there anymore. I left the engine running for a moment, not because I was cold, but because I needed to sit in the quiet hum of something that still listened when I turned the key. The porch light was off. Typical. I killed the engine, pocketed my keys, and stepped out into the stillness. My boots crunched lightly over the snow as I walked up the front steps. I didn't knock. The spare key was still under the broken flower pot. Of course, they hadn't moved it. The lock turned with a soft click, and I slipped inside, careful not to let the door creak. The house was dark, except for the faint blue glow from the television in the living room. I could hear the familiar rhythm of Dad's snores coming from the recliner. Cairo's door was shut, music pulsing faintly through the wood. Mom's light was off, but I knew better than to assume she was asleep. She had a way of pretending to rest, just to eavesdrop. I kept my footsteps light as I moved toward the stairs. Every step up that staircase felt like wading through a memory. That house had been the backdrop of my entire childhood. Birthday parties, silent dinners, Cairo's tantrums, my report cards left unopened on the counter. Now, it was just walls. My old bedroom was exactly as I'd left it. Pale yellow walls, a corkboard still pinned with fading receipts and college acceptance letters, and the scent of something vaguely nostalgic, old paper maybe, or the lavender candle I left behind last spring. I dropped my purse onto the desk chair and opened my closet. My overnight bag was already there, the same one I'd taken on work trips. I began folding sweaters into it one by one, mechanically. But when I reached for my laptop, the one I always kept in the drawer under the printer tray. It wasn't there. I checked the desk, the nightstand, even the linen closet down the hall. Nothing. Panic didn't hit me immediately. What I felt first was confusion, like maybe I was misremembering where I'd left it. But I knew better. Back in my room, I opened the top drawer of my desk. Amid expired printer ink and old pay stubs, something unfamiliar sat flat and folded. A receipt. My breath caught as I read the header. Silver Ponds, Charlotte, NC. $300. The item listed, MacBook Pro, serial number matching mine. The name signed at the bottom, Vera M. Wallace. For a full 30 seconds, I couldn't move. The paper trembled slightly between my fingers. It wasn't just that my laptop was gone. It wasn't just that my mother had pawned it. It was the casualness of it, the timing. She had waited until I'd gone to the store that afternoon. She knew I wouldn't check the drawer. She knew I'd be too busy cooking, cleaning, making sure the Christmas roast didn't burn while she and Dad lounged in the living room pretending not to hear the timer. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. There it was, confirmation. At 11:06 a.m., the power bill had been auto-deducted, $148.67. My name was still the account holder. They'd waited until I paid for everything. Then they kicked me out. My jaw tightened as I folded the receipt, slid it into my wallet, and closed the drawer. Back downstairs, I moved quietly past the dining room where the remains of dinner still sat untouched. I paused for just a second before stepping into the living room. The glow of the TV lit the room in a soft blue haze. Dad was out cold in the recliner, mouth slightly open, a blanket bunched at his feet. His snores filled the silence like a metronome, steady, ignorant. I moved toward the fireplace, needing something I couldn't yet name. The family photos were still there, lined up like trophies on the mantel. Except something was different. A new frame had been added. My eyes landed on it, and time slowed. It was a professionally taken family portrait, one of those cheesy department store studio shots with soft lighting and coordinated outfits. Dad in his Sunday flannel, Mom in her pearl earrings, Cairo looking smug in a collared shirt. But I wasn't in it. There was no empty space, no awkward crop, just three people smiling, with no sign that a fourth had ever existed. They'd taken a new family photo, and they hadn't told me. I stepped closer, scanning the background. It wasn't an old picture. They were wearing clothes I'd seen them buy last month. The date on the frame's sticker confirmed it, just 2 weeks ago. They had gone to the trouble of replacing me. Not just in words, not just in attitude, but in image. You don't erase someone on accident. I stared at the photo for a moment longer, then turned away. Back in my room, I knelt beside the bed and pulled out the shoebox labeled Tax. It was dusty, the tape peeling. Inside, a meticulous record of everything I'd contributed over the past 3 years. Utility bills, car insurance premiums, receipts from the grocery store, and copies of transfer confirmations from my savings to theirs. Proof. They could delete photos. But not this. I sat at the edge of the bed, shoebox in my lap, my mind oddly still. Not spiraling, not even sad, just clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family argument. This was betrayal, planned, quiet, and complete. They had played their hand. Now it was my turn. I didn't sleep that night. After leaving the house, I drove without direction for a while, circling familiar streets like I was trying to rewind something that couldn't be undone. Eventually, I parked in the lot of a gas station that had closed early for Christmas. The overhead lights flickered, casting my car in a low amber hue that made the frost on my windshield glow. I reclined the seat back just enough to ease the pressure in my lower back and wrapped my coat tighter around me. I didn't even check the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see myself to know how I looked. Hollow, like someone who had spent the last decade trying to earn a seat at a table she never realized had no chair for her in the first place. I powered on my phone. Still no calls, no texts, not even Cairo, who usually sent some lazy meme or a yo just to keep up the illusion that we were close. I stared at the cracked screen. "Merry Christmas to me," I whispered. and let the sarcasm float out with the condensation on the glass. The frost built up slowly as the cold outside seeped into the cabin. My breath fogged in the air. Still, I didn't cry. The hurt hadn't reached the surface yet. It was moving inside me like groundwater. Slow, deep, steady. I wasn't even sure it would ever show as tears. Maybe it would just sit there, settling into the corners of my bones. At some point, my eyes drifted shut. I don't know if I slept. Maybe I just blacked out from emotional exhaustion. When the sky started to lighten, I sat upright. My joints ached from the awkward angle. I stretched slowly, reached into my bag for a granola bar, and chewed without tasting it. Then I looked out the window and realized where I was parked, 3 blocks from my childhood street. It wasn't intentional, I swear. My hands must have driven on instinct, like I needed to be near something that once resembled safety. But I didn't want to go back to that house, not after last night, not after the pawn receipt, not after the family photo that wrote me out like a bad memory. I let the engine turn over, heat blowing through vents that took their time warming. And then, without fully deciding, I put the car in drive and turned toward the house next door to ours. Althea's house. She'd been our neighbor for as long as I could remember. Retired schoolteacher, widow, the kind of woman who baked without recipes and could still recite all the U.S. presidents in order. When I was little, she gave me notebooks with my name etched in calligraphy on the cover. When Mom forgot to pick me up from choir practice, Althea would show up in that old blue sedan and never once make me feel like a burden. The porch light was on. I parked by the curb, hands sweating on the wheel. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe she'd smile. Maybe she'd frown and ask what I was doing out here at dawn like some lost teenager. But I needed something, anything, that didn't look at me like I owed it everything. I stepped out, legs stiff, boots crunching over salt and ice. I rang the bell once and waited. The door creaked open slowly. Althea stood in her robe, her eyes soft, her silver hair pulled back in a loose braid. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look surprised. "Sky," she said gently. "Come in, sweetheart. Let me put the kettle on." That was it. No questions, no pity in her voice, just an invitation. I stepped inside, the warmth wrapping around me like an old quilt. The smell of cinnamon and something herbal, probably chamomile, drifted through the air. I slipped off my coat, and she handed me slippers like it was the most natural thing in the world. The living room hadn't changed since I was 12. Books lined the walls, teacups displayed in an antique cabinet, and a faded patchwork afghan still draped over the armchair. I sat on the couch, sinking into a cushion that had known decades of stories. She disappeared into the kitchen. I could hear the kettle start to hiss. I didn't speak, and she didn't ask. It felt strange, being allowed to sit in silence without someone trying to fill it with noise or judgment. With my family, silence was either a weapon or a wall. Here, it was just space. Space to breathe. The tea arrived in a porcelain cup with little violets painted around the rim. She handed me a slice of toast, too, lightly buttered. No fanfare, no eat up, or you must be starving. Just food, just kindness. I took a sip and closed my eyes. She sat in the chair across from me, her own tea in hand. She didn't fidget, she didn't rush me, she just let me exist. After a while, she broke the quiet. "You want to shower and rest a bit? The guest room's still made up." I nodded. "If it's not trouble." Her brow lifted just slightly. "You've never been trouble." The words hit deeper than she probably meant them to. I blinked, swallowing hard. I didn't tell her about last night. I didn't mention Dad's words or the laptop or the photo. I didn't unpack the years of quiet erasure I had accepted as normal. But I think she knew. Maybe not the details, but the shape of the pain. She'd taught hundreds of kids. She knew the signs. I spent the rest of the morning in the guest room. I showered, dressed in clean clothes from my overnight bag, sat on the edge of the bed and watched the light crawl across the wall as the sun climbed. At noon, Althea knocked gently and left a sandwich and a note on the tray. "You're not alone. Rest, then rise." No lecture, no timeline, just space. That afternoon, I opened my laptop, the one I still had, my work backup, and began cataloging everything. Bills, messages, receipts. It was like sorting through the remains of a broken home, piece by piece. But it gave me clarity. Focus. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. No one had ever taught me how to protect myself from family. It always felt taboo to even think it. But Althea's silence gave me permission to let go of that rule. To admit that love without respect is just manipulation with prettier packaging. I didn't know what I'd do next. But I knew I wasn't going back to the house that decided I didn't exist. I didn't need anyone to tell me that was the right choice. Sometimes, what you don't say says everything. She didn't offer answers. She offered silence. And for once, that silence didn't hurt. By the time the sun had made its quiet crawl across Althea's floral curtains, I was already dressed and sipping lukewarm coffee at her kitchen table. The silence in her home wasn't tense or heavy. It was the kind of quiet that lets you think clearly, like you're finally allowed to hear yourself without interruption. My fingers hovered above the borrowed laptop she'd let me use, an older model that still ran better than my trust in people. I had already connected to her Wi-Fi, pulled up my email, and logged into the half-dozen accounts that had quietly kept my family's house running for the last 3 years. Electric, gas, internet, water, even the trash service, all under my name. I used to think it was a good thing. That they trusted me. That I was reliable. Needed. That was the lie I told myself every time I signed a renewal contract or paid a late bill without being asked. It wasn't trust. It was dependence disguised as love. And now, looking at the due dates and the balance totals, I saw the truth. I had paid for their comfort at the cost of my own clarity. The cursor blinked at me like it was waiting for permission to move. I clicked disconnect on the electric account. Then the gas, internet, water, trash pickup. Every click was a small, silent reclaiming. They didn't just lose a daughter last night, they lost the person keeping their lights on. Somewhere around the third cancellation, I paused and leaned back in my chair. My hands were steady, my chest no longer burned. There was no guilt, only breath. That house ran because of me. If they thought they could erase me and still enjoy the benefits of my labor, it was time they felt the absence they created. A few hours passed. Althea didn't interrupt. She just dropped a fresh cup of coffee beside me, gave my shoulder a quiet pat, and went back to reading by the window. The first text came just after lunch. I didn't recognize the number right away, but the area code was local. Sky, you're not gonna believe this. Power cut out mid-dinner at your parents'. Chaos. I blinked. The next text came with screenshots, blurry images of a candlelit dining table, faces half lit, half confused. One message stood out in bold font. Is it true? You were the one paying for everything? I didn't answer. I didn't even smirk. But inside, something shifted, like a door had quietly closed with a satisfying click. They had another holiday dinner. Without me, no warning, no invitation, and the power had gone out right in the middle of it. Perfect timing. And now the people they'd spent years crafting a perfect image for, they were finally seeing through the cracks. I scrolled through the texts again, not to read them, but to feel the weight of them, the sudden shift. The realization hitting them all at once. They had built a life using parts of me they never acknowledged. That night, while Althea wrapped up her knitting and turned in early, I stayed up with the glow of the laptop lighting my face in the dark. I opened a blank email. No subject line yet, no greeting. Just the blinking cursor again, waiting patiently. I clicked Attach and selected the files I had organized so carefully. Utility receipts, insurance payments, payment logs, bank transfers. Every line item showed my name, my signature, my responsibility. Every bit of proof that I hadn't just contributed, I had carried them. The subject line came to me all at once. This is the last thing I will ever send to this family. No explanation, no story, no plea for understanding, just facts. I hit send, then I blocked every single recipient. It was almost too quiet afterward, like the moment you shut off a car engine after a long road trip and your ears still ring from the hum. But I felt no regret, not even a sliver. I slept deeply that night. Not because things were fixed, but because I finally stopped holding up something that was never mine to support. The next morning, I woke to the smell of toast and the sound of birds somewhere near the window. Althea's voice was soft as she greeted me, but she didn't linger, just handed me a plate and let me eat in peace. I was halfway through a slice when my phone lit up with a notification. Rachel. I hadn't heard from my cousin in months. We used to be close when we were kids, back before family reunions started to feel like job interviews and competition replaced conversation. Her message was short. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I stared at the words for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the screen. I could have replied, could have said something sarcastic or cold, could have asked why she never reached out sooner, but I didn't. Instead, I turned the screen off and placed the phone face down on the table. It was enough. She saw the truth. Finally, someone outside those walls saw what I had been carrying. The ice that had hardened inside me cracked just a little, not enough to break, not yet, but it shifted. I finished my toast, washed the plate, and let myself sit in the quiet. They wanted to pretend I was never part of that family. Fine. But I had the paperwork to prove otherwise. And now, so did everyone else. I didn't raise my voice, but somehow, the lights went out, and the truth turned on. The next morning, I woke up to the faint buzz of my phone vibrating against the wooden nightstand. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was another notification from the family group chat I hadn't seen since Christmas Eve. But the screen stayed lit a second too long enough to catch my attention. Security alert, suspicious login attempt to your savings account. I sat up straight, the blanket pooling around my waist. The room was still dim, with soft light pushing through the curtains. My hands moved on instinct. I unlocked the phone and opened the alert. The bank had flagged an IP address they recognized, one that had been previously linked to my home network. I scrolled down. A second message had come in less than 2 minutes later. Caller attempted verification by phone. Failed security questions. I closed my eyes, jaw tightening. My chest didn't ache this time. It burned, low and sharp, like someone had driven a nail through the final nerve I had left. I didn't pace. I didn't panic. I opened the bank's app and called customer service. A woman named Carla answered. She sounded younger than me, cheerful in the way someone is when they haven't been chewed up by family yet. I just received a fraud alert, I told her, keeping my tone even. I need to verify the activity and lock the account. She asked me the standard questions: mother's maiden name, last transaction, zip code. Then came the pause, the part where she pulled up the details. I do see that someone attempted access earlier this morning, she said. They used partial information that matched your file. From where? Her keyboard clicks were soft but deliberate. IP matches your previous primary login location. You mean my parents' house? Another pause. Carla didn't confirm it, but she didn't need to. Was the caller a woman? A beat, then. Yes, ma'am. I drew in a slow breath. Please flag the account. I want to add verbal-only authentication and remove any secondary IP logins. Also, send me a statement with the attempt details. Of course, she said gently. Are you okay? I paused for the first time. No, I said. But I will be. We ended the call. I placed the phone on the table and stared at the ceiling for a few seconds before I moved. Then, calmly, I walked to the kitchen where Althea was stirring something in a small pot. Oatmeal, maybe. She didn't turn when I entered. Morning, sweetheart. Morning. She must have sensed something in my voice. She turned slightly, gave me a look that asked everything without saying a word. I gave her a soft nod, grabbed my laptop, and returned to the dining table. I opened a blank email. No greeting. Just the kind of message that couldn't be misread. If any further attempts are made to access my financial accounts or property, legal action will follow. This is not a threat. This is documentation. I stared at it for a moment, then typed the final sentence. What's yours is yours. What's mine is protected now. I didn't sign it with Love Sky. I didn't sign it at all. Just sent it. Then I blocked both their emails. After lunch, I needed to clear my head. I opened the folder I hadn't touched in months, the one I used to organize legal documents back when I was helping Dad refinance the house. I still had the files, out of habit, out of hope maybe, that keeping proof meant keeping peace. I scrolled through PDFs, mortgage contracts, insurance renewals, property tax receipts. That's when I found it. The original homeowner's insurance policy had both our names, Weldon and Sky Wallace. I remembered the day we set it up. I had co-signed everything when his credit was too low. The agent said, "You're doing a good thing, helping your father like this." Now, a new document, same policy, different date. Only two names, Weldon and Cairo. I blinked, went back to check the revision date. 2 months ago. While I was still paying the premiums, while I was still under the impression that the house, though never legally mine, still honored my name for what it represented. A daughter who never said no, even when she should have. I clicked through a few more documents, my fingers cold against the keyboard. Then I whispered aloud, more to the quiet around me than to myself. You didn't just erase me emotionally. You tried to erase me legally. The fact that my name had been removed so quietly, without notice, was one thing. But the fact that they did it while still letting me foot the bill? That was war. I printed everything, every invoice, every copy of the switch, every receipt tied to the house. Althea helped me set up her old scanner, and we went through the files together. She didn't ask for details. She didn't say, "You should have seen this coming." She just poured tea and helped label folders. I had spent my whole life believing silence was the price of loyalty. But now, I was learning that silence could also be a weapon, if used precisely. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't about evening the score or teaching them a lesson. This was protection. This was what self-defense looked like when you didn't have fists to throw, but had a printer and a timeline. That evening, I created a master folder on a thumb drive. Inside, every document, every email, every dollar accounted for. In the eyes of the law, I had receipts. They declared me the villain. I'd show them the contract they signed. They thought silence meant surrender. I was just loading my arsenal. It didn't take long for them to respond. Less than 24 hours after I sent the email, the one with the warning and the legal language so clear even a child could understand it, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew the voice the moment I picked up. "Sky," my mother began. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. Her voice sharpened. "You're seriously going through with this, after everything we've done for you?" Still, I stayed silent. She took that as permission to continue, and the flood came quickly. "We gave you everything, your childhood, your room, your clothes. We let you stay here while you found yourself, and now this, threatening legal action against your own parents? Let—" the word bounced around in my skull like a bell. "Let me stay," as if my money hadn't kept the lights on, as if I hadn't been covering everything from groceries to Mom's prescriptions while they sat back and acted like they were doing me a favor by letting me sleep in my old room. "You think we owe you something?" she hissed. "You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for us. You owe us, Sky. You owe us your life." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, not because I wanted to hear more, but because I needed to hear it all, every venomous word. "I hope you know what you're doing," she snapped, voice rising. "Because once you take this step, there's no coming back." She waited, but I had nothing left to say. I hung up, and this time, it was me who made the silence feel heavy. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the phone in my hand, my pulse steady. "They see love as a transaction," I said quietly to myself. "Every diaper, every meal. Now a debt I'm expected to pay forever." Later, as I sat back at Althea's kitchen table, the steam rising from the cup of tea she slid in front of me seemed almost symbolic. Warmth offered freely, without expectation. She eased into the seat across from me, her sweater sleeves pushed up, her eyes soft but knowing. "That's not how love works, honey," she said. "They're confusing obligation with ownership." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and nodded slowly. Time to make that clear. By afternoon, I was in the quiet waiting room of a law office. The scent of old paper and brewed coffee lingered in the air. A woman in her mid-40s, wearing no-nonsense heels and wire-rimmed glasses, sat across from me, flipping through the folders I had brought. She didn't ask me why I wanted to do this. She didn't give me a lecture on family or reconciliation. She just examined the documents with the kind of focus I hadn't seen in anyone since grad school. "You've got everything you need," she said at last, closing the last folder and tapping her pen against the cover. "Timeline's airtight. Paper trail is clean. This isn't just reaction. This is documentation." I nodded. She slid 2 forms toward me, one for the restraining order, the other, the civil claim, for fraudulent removal of my name from the property, unauthorized use of financial accounts, and recovery of funds. I signed them both, not with a flourish, not with emotion, just with a steadiness that came from months, no, years, of swallowing things that never should have been mine to digest. When I finished, she collected the forms and gave me a look, not pitying, but respectful. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "I know," I replied. The office was quiet as I stood, smoothed down my coat, and walked out into the cold again. Charlotte's winter didn't bite like northern states did, but it still had a way of making you feel awake, alive, real. Back at Althea's, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat down at the small desk in the corner of the guest room. My laptop flickered on, the background image still the one from my last vacation, an image I barely remembered taking. For a moment, I stared at it. Then I opened my inbox. My fingers moved swiftly. I sent an email to HR requesting time off. I used simple language, no explanations. "I'll be taking an extended leave effective immediately. I'll provide documentation if needed." Then I hit send. This wasn't me running away. This was me clearing the deck so I could stand up taller without the weight of old anchors chained to my ankles. I didn't tell Althea I had filed the papers. She'd know soon enough. She didn't need me to say it aloud. Some truths sit more comfortably in the space between words. That evening, she made cornbread and stew. We ate quietly, the way 2 people do when they understand each other without the burden of constant dialogue. After dinner, she poured us both glasses of warm cider, and we sat on the couch, the lamp casting a soft glow against the bookcase. "I'm not doing this to punish them," I said quietly, breaking the silence. Althea didn't turn to look at me. She just nodded once, like she'd known it all along. "I'm doing it so they never get the chance to do it again, to me, or to anyone else." She sipped her cider. "That's what boundaries are, Sky. Not walls. Lines. Clear ones." I sat with that for a while. This wasn't vengeance. This was the paperwork of survival. The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when the text messages started rolling in. First, it was Emma, a girl I'd shared a dorm with in college. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. "I heard what you did," she wrote. "How could you turn your back on your own parents?" Then a former coworker chimed in. "They're saying you took money that wasn't yours. Is that true?" A few others followed, short, vague, all soaked in the same tone, disbelief, judgment, the kind of messages that don't come from people asking because they care, but because they've already made up their minds. I sat on Althea's porch swing, wrapped in a thick gray shawl she'd draped over the backrest, my phone glowing against the morning chill. I didn't respond to any of them. Not out of anger, not even out of pride, just fatigue. The lies had moved fast, faster than the truth ever could. Dad must have started talking the moment he realized I wasn't backing down. He was always better at playing the victim than telling the whole story, and people believed him because he sounded like a man trying to keep his family together, while I, apparently, was now the woman trying to tear it apart. Funny how quiet some folks had been all those years I paid the mortgage. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then opened the note app on my phone. I copied the case number from my civil claim and pasted it into a new message. That's all I'd send back if I replied at all. Proof. Let them choke on it. The day moved slowly after that. Althea busied herself with chores. I tried to read but couldn't concentrate. Around 5 o'clock, I made a simple dinner for us both, grilled cheese and tomato soup, then cleaned the kitchen while she watered the plants. We had just settled into the living room, cups of tea in hand, when the knock came. It wasn't the kind of knock you hear and think, oh, someone's dropping by. It was loud, demanding, repetitive. 3 sharp bangs, a pause, then 2 more. I froze. Althea rose quietly and walked to the front window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. She turned to me, her voice calm but firm. It's him. I didn't need to ask who. I already knew. I stood slowly, my fingers tight around the handle of my mug. Another knock, harder this time. Then his voice. Sky! Weldon's voice cracked through the quiet evening air. You want a war? You got one. I want my damn car back. Althea stepped closer to me, her presence steady. You don't have to open that door. I nodded, my heart beating hard now, but not out of fear, out of focus. I set the mug down, reached for my phone, and dialed. 911, what's your emergency? My father is trespassing at my location. He's shouting and attempting to intimidate me. I have a restraining order pending, and I need assistance. The dispatcher was efficient. Calm. Promised officers would arrive in minutes. Outside, Dad kept yelling, You're not getting away with this, Sky. That car is mine. Everything you have came from me. I walked to the peephole and looked out. He was red-faced, pacing in the front yard, fists clenched, voice echoing down the block. The lights in nearby houses flicked on, curtains shifted. A neighbor stepped out across the street. Mrs. Perkins, I think her name was. She held a phone in her hand. Filming. Dad didn't notice. Althea placed her hand lightly on my shoulder. You did the right thing calling. I nodded again. Soon, blue and red lights washed across the porch. 2 officers stepped out of the cruiser and approached slowly, their flashlights catching Dad mid-rant. Sir, step away from the door, one officer said firmly. Hands where we can see them. Dad turned, startled. This is my daughter's house. My car. I have every right. She doesn't live under your roof anymore, sir, the second officer cut in, and the vehicle is registered in her name. We've reviewed the documentation. The keys, sir, the first officer said. For a second, Dad didn't move. He just stood there, jaw clenched, breathing heavy like he was still looking for a fight. But then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled the spare keys out, and handed them over. The moment the keys left his hand, his shoulders slumped. All the noise drained from his body, like he realized too late that no one was playing by his rules anymore. They escorted him to the curb. Neighbors had gathered quietly, watching from porches and driveways. A few muttered to each other. No one stepped in. And finally, I exhaled. Not just air, something deeper, something buried. I closed the door gently. Althea stayed close but didn't say anything. We both sat down again, slowly, carefully, as if something sacred had just ended. After a while, she said softly, You did the hard thing. That's what makes it brave. I didn't respond right away, just looked at her and gave the smallest nod. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, not from stress, but from the unfamiliar feeling of safety. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. New messages. This time, the tone had shifted. Sky, I didn't know everything. I'm sorry. I just saw the video. That was a lot. Are you okay? I always believed you. I was just scared to say it. I didn't respond, not yet, because I realized something. Those texts weren't about me. They were about people trying to clear their conscience, hoping I'd give them permission to feel better about staying silent. But silence had a cost. One I'd paid too many times already. Still, I didn't feel bitter. I felt clear. Because the first time my father said, My house, my rules, I believed him. Tonight, the rules changed. New Year's Eve crept in quietly. No fanfare, no countdowns in my world. Just the ticking of a clock on Althea's mantle and the occasional hum of the space heater. I hadn't planned to stay this long, but I also hadn't planned for the world to tilt quite the way it had. Some shifts don't come with announcements. They arrive in silence and settle like dust on everything you thought you could still recognize. It was around 10:30 that morning when I got the voicemail. Sky, it's Rachel. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but they lost the house. The bank posted the foreclosure notice this morning. It's done. She didn't say your parents. She said they. I noted that, small shift, but meaningful. I didn't replay the message. I didn't need to. I sat still for a long time, hands wrapped around my coffee mug, feeling the heat fade slowly. No sense of victory came. No vindication. Just a quiet understanding that the natural consequence had finally arrived. They gambled I would come back. They bet on my guilt. On the strings they had pulled so many times, they assumed they'd always be able to tug them and make me dance. They were wrong. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. It was Vera. I watched the screen until the ringing stopped. When the voicemail icon popped up, I waited a minute before hitting play. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. We didn't know it would come to this. We just thought you'd come back eventually, that you'd cool off, that maybe you'd remember we're still your parents, that you'd stop trying to punish us. We're your family, Sky. Families fight. But they come back. I blocked the number after that, not out of spite, but self-preservation. I had warned them, explicitly, repeatedly. They chose to believe the rules didn't apply to them, so they lost the game they rigged. Around the neighborhood, word was spreading. I didn't have to say anything. The videos of Dad yelling on Althea's porch had already made their way to several local Facebook groups. It didn't take long before neighbors started whispering or flat out messaging me with neutral offerings. Hope you're okay. Hang in there. And the most infuriating one, there are two sides to every story. Cairo, naturally, took to social media with a string of vague posts. You think you know someone. I'd never betray blood like that. But his likes were few. His audience quieter now. I didn't comment, didn't repost. I watched from a distance and let it all happen. Because for the first time, I didn't need to prove anything. The truth had become its own echo chamber. All I had to do was let it ring. 2 days earlier, a therapist from a local college had reached out. She was organizing a panel on boundaries in family systems, stories of reclaiming identity after emotional estrangement. She asked if I would speak. At first, I almost said no. What could I possibly say that wouldn't sound like just another bad daughter complaining about childhood wounds? But the more I sat with it, the more I realized this wasn't about blaming. It was about freeing the next person who didn't know how to call abuse what it really was, just because it wore a Christmas sweater and said grace at dinner. So I said yes. And now, here I was, sitting in the back row of a modest auditorium at Charlotte Community College, wearing a thrifted blazer, flats that pinched slightly, and hands shaking just enough to remind me this still mattered. I didn't bring slides. I didn't need a PowerPoint to tell the truth. When it was my turn, I walked slowly to the podium. The lights were softer than I expected, the room quieter. No one shuffled, no one whispered. I cleared my throat. Hi, I'm Sky. The mic picked up even my breath. A lot of people think that love and obligation are the same thing, that if someone feeds you, houses you, puts a roof over your head, even if they humiliate you in the process, you owe them forever. And if you stop paying, they call you ungrateful. A pause. They don't call you tired. They don't call you brave. They don't call you a survivor. They call you selfish, cold, a leech. I let the word hang. I heard that word not long ago, from my own father, at the dinner table, because I got promoted, because I spoke up. The room was completely still. No one stood up for me. Not then. Not when they took my things. Not when they spread lies. But that silence, it gave me space. And I filled it with truth, with boundaries, with paperwork. And I stopped apologizing for not setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I didn't cry. My voice didn't crack. I told the story without names, without revenge. Just facts. Just truth. When I finished, the silence broke into applause. Not thunderous, but solid. Real. Afterward, a girl no older than 20 stopped me near the snack table. Her hands trembled slightly as she held out a napkin-wrapped cookie. I thought it was just me, she said. I took the cookie, my throat tightening. It never is. That night, as Althea drove us home, the Charlotte skyline sparkled ahead. Fireworks were already starting near downtown, the bursts of color reflecting off office buildings and glassy towers. I stared out the window, not really seeing the lights. They had written me out of their photo, but I had taken the frame, flipped it over, and rebuilt the entire thing. And this time, the new year starts with my name on the door, and no one else holding the key. The first morning of the new year was quiet. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that felt earned. I woke before the sun, the only sound in my new apartment being the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock I'd hung by the kitchen nook. Nothing in the space was luxurious, secondhand furniture, mismatched plates, but every item in that apartment belonged to me, bought, paid for, and chosen on my terms. I pulled on a sweatshirt and padded across the hardwood floor to the window. The streets below were still damp from the late-night celebrations, confetti scattered near the curb, a few deflated balloons tangled in a streetlight wire. Charlotte looked slower this morning, like the entire city had decided to take a breath. Beside the small desk I'd set up in the corner was a cardboard box I hadn't touched since moving in. I opened it now, pulling out the last few things I'd never had time or energy to deal with. Tax folders, a couple of framed photos, and a sealed envelope marked payroll. Inside was my most recent paycheck. The first one with only my name on it. No automatic transfers, no hidden family bills, just clean, earned income for my work alone. I smiled and slid it into a frame I'd bought at the thrift store. I didn't hang it. I didn't need anyone else to see it. I just wanted to know it was there. Later that day, while organizing the tiny kitchen drawer where I kept pens and random paper clips, I came across a small envelope with fading ink. It had been tucked into the side wall of the box, probably from before the move. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. Vera. The handwriting was still perfect, still dramatic in its loops and flourishes, still pretending everything was okay. I didn't open it. Some things don't need to be read to be understood. Healing, I realized, wasn't about pretending the pain had never happened. It was about learning how to live next to it without letting it drag you backward. I slid the envelope back into the drawer, behind a stack of old receipts. Around noon, I made my way to the courthouse. My attorney had asked me to stop by for a final update. I didn't wear anything special, just clean jeans and a soft gray cardigan, but I held my head high when I walked through those doors. The waiting room was mostly empty. I found a seat near the window and watched as clouds drifted across the January sky. She arrived a few minutes later and gave me a small smile before sitting. "They didn't show," she said plainly, flipping open her file. I wasn't surprised. "The judge approved the motion," she continued. "Your name has been removed from all prior joint accounts and liabilities, permanently." I nodded. "Good." She tapped her pen twice on the folder. "You've handled this with a lot more grace than most would have." I gave a half smile. Grace is cheaper than therapy. We exchanged a few more formalities, signed the last page, and that was it. Done. I didn't linger, didn't walk out dramatically. I just returned to my car, sat behind the wheel, and exhaled into the silence, the kind that didn't ache anymore. That afternoon, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and found a text from Rachel waiting. "They're with Uncle Rick now." But even he's getting tired of their stories. I stared at the message, then typed my reply slowly. They'll have to learn how to survive without rewriting mine. No emoji, no signature. I set the phone down and turned to the grant application I'd been working on. A nonprofit supporting young adults estranged from toxic families. I'd been drafting the proposal since before Christmas, but something about today made it easier to finish. I reread the mission statement, adjusted a few lines for clarity, then hit submit. The screen blinked once. Application sent. That night, I lit a candle, the kind Althea used to burn after dinner, cinnamon and clove, and sat by the window. The world didn't look new. It looked the same, but I was different. They had taken what they could, money, time, trust. But what I'd built from those losses, from those cracks in the foundation, that belonged to me now. And no one, not even blood, was taking it back. Some names stay on legal papers. Others get etched into the stories we live after them. Sometimes the people who raise us teach us loyalty, while quietly erasing our worth behind closed doors. This wasn't just a story about bills and betrayal, it was about boundaries, about learning that love without respect is just control in disguise. So tell me, have you ever had to walk away from the people who claim to love you just to save yourself? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true life stories every week. Your story might be next.